Evening. Tonight is Monday, April 25th, 2022, and I'm calling this meeting to order. The Orange County Schools Board of Education pledges to our families, students, staff, and the greater community to conduct our business in a courteous and productive manner, showing respect for fellow board members, staff, and citizens. The board asks its citizens to conduct themselves with the same courtesy towards all staff members and each other. As per board policy, Robert's Rules of Order will be used to conduct meetings. Following the Pledge of Allegiance, a moment of silence will be observed before we begin our business. Public comment will be held after the board adopts tonight's agenda. The board also asks that you check your cell phones and other electronic devices to be sure that they are turned off or on vibrate in order to avoid disruptions during the meeting. If you would, please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Justice for all.
As we begin our work this evening, I would like to recognize that Orange County Schools was established on land previously settled by the ancestors of the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation. This board has made a commitment to honor and respect the heritage of Indigenous and all members of our OCS community, to work to undo decades of racial harm, and to build, to the best of our ability, a community that fosters a sense of belonging for all of our students so that they may thrive and succeed. Please join me now for a moment of silence. Thank you. Dr. Felder, I'm going to pass to you for recognitions.
Thank you so much, Chair Doyle. So good evening, Chair Doyle, Vice Chair Stevens, to the entire board, to our staff, our families, students, and members of the community. Well, May is brimming with recognitions and celebrations. And so tonight we will highlight several, actually a few more than several, but starting with this first one, a recognition of May as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So in 1990, President George W. Bush designated the month of May as Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. The month of May was chosen to commemorate the immigration of the first Japanese to the United States on May 7, 1843, and to mark the anniversary of the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad on May 10, 1869. The majority of the workers who laid the tracks were Chinese immigrants. In 2019, it was estimated that there are 5.2 million Asian residents in the United States, and 1.6 is the estimate number of Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander residents in the as part of the United States. Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month recognizes the contributions and influences of Asian Americans and Pacific Islander Americans to the history, culture, and achievement of the United States. We are honored to recognize and celebrate them this month. Well, next week, while the board won't be meeting, we will be celebrating National Teacher Appreciation Week, and so we wanted to highlight this tonight. So that's May 2nd through May 6th. At the last board meeting, we recognized the district's Extraordinary Teachers of the Year. At tonight's meeting and throughout the year, we recognize all of the district's extraordinary educators, all 520 of them. Our teachers have all worked tirelessly with students, families, and each other to keep things moving forward despite another unpredictable year. Through all the challenges we've faced this year, educators and families continue to stick together to show students a bright path forward. This Teacher Appreciation Week will be just another opportunity to acknowledge the lengths that Orange County Schools educators will go to ensure each and every student has the tools to learn, to grow, and thrive. We couldn't be more thankful to all of the educators and staff in Orange County Schools for their outstanding efforts this year. We applaud each and every one of them and will be distributing a sweet treat to all as a small token of our appreciation next week. So thank you to all of our teachers. And so speaking of teachers, tonight we want to recognize Cedar Ridge High School's family and consumer science teacher, Mrs. Monique Holmes. Oh yeah, she has a cheering section there. Mrs. Holmes. Head down while I continue to laud you. And so she was chosen by her CTE peers to represent Orange County Schools as the 2021-2022 NCCAT CTE Teacher of the Year nominee. In the coming weeks, she will represent our district as a contender for the title of 2021-2022 NCCAT, which stands for North Carolina Center for the Advancement of Teaching, CTE Teacher of the Year in the state of North Carolina. This is NCCAT's inaugural year, so they've not done this before, honoring a CTE Teacher of the Year. We are thrilled to have Ms. Holmes serve as the nominee for Orange County Schools. Next, Ms. Holmes will prepare a portfolio for the NCCAT judging and the CTE Teacher of the Year selection process, which will happen over the summer. Finalists for the title will be named in August, and the sole winner will be announced at a special NCCAT event in October. So congratulations and good luck to Ms. Holmes. She is here, as you can see, tonight, and we would like to give her an opportunity to say a few words. She is joined, I understand, by her husband, her two sons, and her sister, as well as Ms. Shannon Braxton, Director of CTE and the Arts for the district. So congratulations to you.
Thank you all. Thank you, wonderful Orange County Schools Board, for the opportunity. I want to say thank you to my awesome CP director, Ms. Shannon Braxton, Ms. Belinda Horns, and everyone here. I just really feel blessed to have this opportunity to represent Orange County Schools. Orange County Schools has been awesome to me as an educator and as a parent as well. I too have two kids there. So I look forward to moving forward and submitting my wonderful portfolio to represent Orange County Schools. And I am just grateful for the opportunity. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Aw. All right. Aw. All right, wonderful. Well, the recognitions continue. So next week, we will be celebrating our teachers, but we'll also celebrate our school nurses as it is National School Nurse Week. And so this week is established to foster a better understanding of the role of school nurses in the educational setting. School nurses serve as a critical health hub for students, ensuring that students are ready for learning by managing complex chronic conditions, identifying and addressing mental health issues, leveling the field on health disparities, promoting healthy behaviors, connecting families to healthcare providers, handling medical emergencies, and now by helping students, families, and the district continue to navigate the pandemic. So it has been said that for every dollar spent on a full-time school nurse, society would get at least $2.20 back. Talk about a good return on an investment. So indeed, school nurses are essential for healthy students, healthy schools, and healthy communities. So Orange County Schools is so fortunate to have school nurses, and we applaud each and every one of them today and every day. So thank you to our school nurses. All right, so the next celebration is for our after-school program. So After-School Professional Appreciation Week aims to recognize those who work with youth during out-of-school hours. The week is marked by celebrations to encourage people to thank our after-school professionals who make a difference in the lives of young people in their communities. At this time, I would like to invite our Director of After-School Programs, Ms. Tamara Mathis, to read a proclamation regarding After-School Professionals Appreciation Week. And the proclamation is from Orange County's Mayor, Ms. Weaver.
Good afternoon, Board Chair, Vice Chair, Dr. Felder, Orange County School staff, Orange County School employees, parents, and especially our kids. This is a proclamation recognizing After-School Professionals Appreciation Week, which starts today, April 25th through the 29th, 2022. Whereas the town of Hillsborough fully recognizes that after-school professionals, those who work with children and youth in a wide variety of programs, settings to provide extended learning opportunities during out-of-school hours, which is before school, after school, and summer, have a positive effect on our children, families, community, and businesses. And whereas after-school professionals are a decisive element in children's access to high-quality relationships and expanding opportunities beyond what they have access at school and at home, which they need to reach their full potential. And whereas after-school professionals deserve appreciation for all that they do for children to enhance their education, promote physical health and emotional health, provide a safe environment and expose them to new experiences. And whereas the town of Hillsborough, North Carolina is committed to supporting the professionals who provide expanded learning opportunities that will help close the achievement gap, nurture the next generation of engaged community members, and prepare young people to compete in the global economy. Now, therefore, I, Jean Weaver, Mayor of the town of Hillsborough, do hereby proclaim April 25th through 29th, 2022 as After School Professionals Week in the town of Hillsborough. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused this seal of the town of Hillsborough to be affixed the 11th day of April in the year 2022, signed, Jen Weaver, Mayor, Town of Hillsborough.
All right. Right. All right, our next recognition is for 4 Orange High School FAA members who recently won the state FFA Horse Evaluation Career Development event, which was held on April 9th in Martin County. These students took the top honors from among 26 teams and 89 individual competitors. Orange High School's team members are Samantha Durham, Allie Wilkinson, Chloe Hoffman, and Haley Whipp. Samantha Durham, an Orange High School junior, had the highest score for the entire contest in horse evaluation. The team of 4 will be preparing for nationals this October by attending horse shows, speaking with industry professionals, and putting in a lot of practice hours from now until then. The national competition will take place in Indianapolis, Indiana in the fall. We are so proud of their accomplishment. Congratulations to the team and to the Orange High School ag teacher, Alexis Cates. Well, at this time, we want to say thank you. A big thank you to all of our volunteers, as Governor Cooper recently acknowledged that this is National Volunteer Week in North Carolina with an official proclamation. So Orange County Schools appreciates all of its dedicated school volunteers. Without the help of those who selfishly step in to help meet staff and student needs, there is much that would have gone undone. We want you to know your efforts are not unnoticed, and we appreciate you and your sacrifices. So thank you for all you do to assist our staff and students each and every day. May is also Mental Health Awareness Month. And so Mental Health Awareness Month, also referred to as Mental Health Month, has been observed in May in the United States since 1949. We will show our support, hopefully in the next board meeting, by wearing green to help raise awareness of trauma and the impact it can have on the physical, emotional, and mental well-being of our children, families, and communities. Each year, millions of Americans face the reality of living with mental illness. Just as this slide states, you cannot tell by looking at someone what they are going through. As a district, we have to help fight the stigma, provide support, educate the public, and advocate for policies that support people with mental illness and their families. And so we will have a special section on our website devoted to mental health events and resources via Orange County Schools and our community partners during May. Yes, that's worth applauding. Absolutely right. Thank you for that. And so May is also Better Hearing and Speech Month. The Better Speech and Hearing Month was founded in 1927 by American Speech Language Hearing Association. The aim of Better Speech and Hearing Month is to raise awareness around both speech and hearing problems, also known as communication disorders, while encouraging people to assess and address their speech and hearing needs if there is a problem. With speech and language disorders among the most common conditions that young children experience, we stress the importance of early intervention. And so families should contact Kelly Qtr, lead speech language pathologist for Orange County Schools, if they have any concerns or questions. And last but not least, as we get a head start on May, we want to acknowledge that May is also Older American Month. And so this is a formal recognition of older Americans, which began with President Kennedy in 1963. At the time, only 17 million Americans reached their 65th birthday, in comparison to over 40 million today. So for everyone celebrating their 65th or beyond birthday next month, congratulations, and we appreciate you. Great. All right, so with that, that concludes the recognitions for tonight's board meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Felder. And just a quick shout out to Ms. Stowe and her team. It looks like the mental health special webpage is already live and it has a lot of great resources on there. Okay, it's time for agenda adoption. And I know of 2 requests to make changes. So actually, Sarah, you mentioned one first.
Yeah, so I was thinking that we could move up the action item around the school bus transportation and put it after the student transporters discussion. I know Mr. Albert is here and would probably want to be able to go back.
It's actually the last one is a work session item. Is that what you mean? Move the work session item?
Oh, it is a work session. Yeah, did I say action item?
You did.
Yeah, so the work session item A, move it after the other thing related to transportation, which is discussion action A, so that we could hit both of those at once. If there aren't any objections, just so.
Does anyone have any
We
objections?
can be
to
out of
that?
here sooner.
I know Will also had a change. Before we vote on the modified agenda, I just wanted Will to give a chance.
Yeah, I would just like to agenda the agenda with 5-10 minutes max, talking about our joint meeting on Thursday with the county commissioners for talking about our budget request.
This is not really a budget request meeting. So.
Right, but that's what I wanted to talk about, but that's where we give them that.
Okay, we can, that's actually not the purpose of Thursday's meeting. That's not the topics for Thursday's meeting, but we can talk about what the topics for Thursday's meeting are.
That's exactly why I want to talk about it.
Okay, all right. Okay.
We need to discuss it.
All right, so I would like a motion to approve the agenda with 2 changes. One is moving up our information session item to after, is that after our first action item?
Yes.
Okay, and then to have basically a second information session topic at the end. Is that what you're saying, Will?
Yes.
Chair Doyle, just if I could, I think we realized that the second read of new policies, that should
Yes.
actually say first read.
Yep.
So can we just approve an agenda with those changes and where it says first reading of new policies.
Right, and that can get pulled out of the consent agenda.
I think it's already been pulled out and
Oh,
put
has
down
it?
for discussion. So
Has it been
I'll make
pulled
that
out?
motion for that.
Second.
Okay. All right, so I have a motion from Ms. Smiley and a second from Ms. McKenzie. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Okay. Now is the time for public comments. After each speaker has been recognized, they will have 3 minutes to speak. The board will not have a discussion with any speaker. No profane or vulgar language will be permitted, nor any personal abuse against any person. Any speaker that uses threatening language will not be permitted to continue. Public comment should not address any specific confidential student or personnel matter. Complaints concerning any specific employee or students are not permissible during public comments. Speakers must conclude their remarks at the end of their 3 minutes. Ms. Stowe, I have that we have 5 speakers. 6 speakers, okay. And our first is Miss Lori Tepper.
Good evening. First, I want to address the gender support policy that was voted in unanimously by this board on December 14th of 2020. One small section of the policy states, quote, "The school principal or their designee should speak with the student first to ascertain concerns a student may have, what support may be needed to keep the student safe at school, and how to involve the student's parents, if at all," unquote. So I repeat that, if at all. You voted to hide information from the parents regarding a life-changing event in the child's life that has lifelong consequences. Where is transparency? And where are you working with the parents for the good of the child? Would you, as a parent, want anything hidden from you about your child? I would like to know if the new candidates who are running for Orange County School Board approve of this plan, and are they willing to go public with their supporting or opposing view? Maybe we can have a board that we can trust. Secondly, as an Orange County resident, a vast majority of my taxes go towards education, so I'm interested in how my money is spent. Congratulations to Mr. Xavier Adams, who received the NCCAT Beginning Teacher of the Year Award. He received $5,000 in cash, instructional supply funds for his school, a piece of fine jewelry from Diamonds Direct, and a Go Global NC trip in 2023. Go Global is a company specializing in upscale sports travel packages with tickets to the world's greatest events. Isn't that special? So now teachers do deserve recognition, and I have no problem rewarding them with instructional supply funds for the school, and maybe even throw in a gift certificate to a nice restaurant. But isn't the cash, trip, and jewelry a bit lavish? And according to NCDPI, over the course of 2018-2021, Orange County spent $10,650 more per student than the statewide average, yet the graduation rate is 2.8% lower than the state average. Most grade school students are not proficient in math or reading. Across all grades and subjects, Chapel Hill, Carlborough City Schools outperforms Orange County schools, including racial groups, by significant margins. How about getting back to the basics of education, like arithmetic and learning to read with phonics, writing, geography, science, technology, and history? And I mean real history as it happened. Politics and ideology, indoctrination have no place in any school, and I want my tax dollars to go towards actually educating the students. Thank you.
Pepper. Miss Kelby Brown is our second speaker. Sorry, Mr. Brown.
Good evening. I'd like to comment on Regulation 1710, Gender Support Guidelines. Referring to gender transitions, it reads, quote, some transgender students have not talked to their parents about their gender identity and do not wish to want their parents to know about their transgender status based on safety concerns or concerns about a lack of acceptance. I'd like to focus on a parent's lack of acceptance. When over 70% of adolescents who express a desire to change genders ultimately reverse that decision, of course, parents are not going to simply accept their children's desire to transition. It's irresponsible beyond comprehension for the school to take on the role of trying to decipher what children are going through regarding sexuality. This is exclusively the parent's role. Code 1710 goes on to state, quote, the school principal or designee should speak with the student first to ascertain concerns the student may have, what support may be needed to keep the student safe at school, and how to involve the student's parents, if at all. Again, if at all, those three words. It clearly indicates you're willing to exclude parents. It's not only irresponsible, it's criminal for anyone who is not a parent to play any part in this process. As a citizen of Orange County, I demand that you reverse this regulation. It not only, if not, the district will most definitely be drawn into unwinnable legal battles. And that would place additional tax burdens on all of us. You should know, if you don't, that Madison County, Wisconsin attempted to put into place regulations like yours. In September of 2020, Dane County Circuit Court Judge Frank Remington issued a partial injunction that prevents school districts from, quote, applying or enforcing any policy guideline or practice that allows or requires district staff to conceal information or to answer untruthfully in response to any question that parents ask about their child at school. And more recently, January 13th, 2022, the Wisconsin Supreme Court granted the case and will determine whether Judge Remington's injunction goes far enough. So it's imperative that the district reverse these policies to avoid costly legal battles that you have no chance of winning, but more importantly, to no longer infringe on parents' rights. The children of Orange County are not wards of Orange County schools. Children belong to parents and guardians alone. Get back to your job and teach academics. You're not social engineers.
Our next speaker is Ms. Sarah Snipes.
Good evening. I'm a parent of two students in Orange County. I'd like to share some background. 12 years ago, my husband and I lived in Durham and had to decide where to send our kids to school. At the time, Durham County schools had terrible scores, so I did research. I looked at neighboring counties and found Orange County had much higher scores than Durham or Wake. So we prayed and we asked for God's guidance, and we ended up moving to Orange County. We were very pleased at the level of care and education our kids received initially. That was until about 4 years ago, when I started seeing noticeable changes in the curriculums, teacher attrition, staffing challenges, and a political polarity that seemed to be plaguing all of the Orange County schools. 3 months before COVID hit, my youngest child had 3 teachers leave right in the middle of his middle school year. The problem was here before COVID. While my kids were at home is when I noticed a huge learning gap. My youngest, a 7th grader, didn't know the difference between a noun and a verb. OCS is now failing my students. My oldest son is now a senior. When he entered Orange County schools, they were the best in the state. Now he's graduating, and now they're the worst in the state. Information that I saw on the OCStruth.org website should make every citizen in this county gasp. I looked at it. I verified the sources. Does this board know that Orange County spends $10,000 more per student than the state average over a 4-year period, but the graduation rates are 3% lower? Again, 10 grand more per student, and we can't even keep up with the state average. How is it that we spend 3 times more, but get 3% lower results of our students graduating? Most people in Orange County used to pride themselves on spending more tax dollars on education because it used to mean better scores, better students, better teachers, a better community, and better outcomes. The board is hired to do a job, educate our kids, and spend our tax dollars wisely. You have not done that. It's time for a change. Let me ask the people in this room and listening, are you okay with spending 3 times more of your money to get worse results in a community that is more polarized than we've ever seen in our history? Our county can do better. That time has come. Education needs to come first again. I urge all citizens, teachers, and parents to vote for change in the upcoming May 17th board elections. It's time for new leadership. It's time for new leadership that will make education a priority again. Thank you.
Ms. Snipes. Our next speaker is Ms. Gretchen Schmid.
Good evening. Heather Burkauer, nationally and globally recognized creator of Parenting Safe Children, teaches parents and families through workshops, classes, and books, among other things, not to keep secrets from their parents. People who tell children to keep secrets from their parents do not have the child's best interest in view. It doesn't take too much thought to see the web of damage this policy can cause for a child and their family. Not only is it detrimental to keep a secret on a topic of the child's health, what other damage is this type of guidance from adults at school setting up this child and family with a precedent for keeping a secret as an okay practice? In December of 2020, when this body unanimously passed gender support policy previously mentioned, the High Court in London ruled in favor of Kira Bell, a young woman in her early 20s who had undergone a course of hormone and surgical treatments to transition when she was 16, protocols identical to those being used here in the US. She was asking for a review of such protocols. The clinic had no explanation for the sudden surge of girls showing up at the clinic for hormones and surgeries, and not one minor teen was ever turned away for the inability to provide informed consent. At that time in London, the detransitioners, as they self-identified on their own social media channels, had already grown to over 17,000 women who had been led down a path with social media and societal pressures cheering them on to join an experiment permanently changing their bodies. With the High Court's decision came this counsel. The hormonal treatments came with serious health risks, which might include loss of fertility and sexual dysfunction, and that the evidence base for this treatment is yet highly uncertain. And by the clinic's own admission, the young women who had begun the process of transition had shown no overall improvement in mood or psychological well-being using standardized psychological measures. All media in London hailed this landmark case and the beginning of legislation to protect minors from these protocols. What role did education play in this case, and what role is it playing here in this county? Where were the adults, aside from the clinicians whose employment and opportunity for a whole new class of patients may have been too much a conflict of interest for sound reasoning? Children and youth have very limited perspective and no ability for truly understanding long-range permanent consequences. From the leadership in this county, we are seeing a full buy-in to what experts are now identifying as a behavioral or social contagion, instead of standing as pillars to support the youth through what has always been a turbulent roller coaster of years. The public school system, paid for by its customers, the taxpayers, is charged with providing a basic education. Children are being taught as young as kindergarten and up ideas about gender, identity, and sexuality, which are in direct opposition to deeply held religious beliefs for many who attend Orange County schools. For one, children and youth to varying ages are naturally asexual, so why is there support for a social idea that pressures children to have an overly myopic view of their ever-changing and developing self as asexual, as if something is different or amiss? As children grow and mature, we all know throughout all time many different identities are tried on. The adults in this space holding such a short-term vision, especially now that there is a body of evidence to refute the idea that lack of affirming surely means a tragic end, and that affirming surely means all is well. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Claire Brennan.
Good evening. This is my first meeting here in front of the school board, so thanks for the opportunity for public comment. I'm here tonight because I looked over the agenda online and I saw item H, number 9, titled Cultural Responsive Leadership. Again, it was item H, number 9. I don't know if the board intentionally buried the lead on this, but this is a pretty hot topic now, and I was surprised that this didn't get a little bit more of a headline in your agenda today. So it was a little disappointing to see this way down the bottom. Again, item H, number 9. In this item, you're asking for $60,000 tonight for this board to approve for I believe it's teaching from the Leadership Academy with the mission statement that says you want to disrupt system inequities, basically teaching teachers how to dismantle system inequities. I went back and looked at the board's policy 1030, which is entitled Equity in Education, and I was somewhat horrified and dismayed to see that the very first sentence said that Orange County Schools acknowledges persistent racial intolerance. And I said to myself, where am I living that this is happening in Orange County? I don't believe that that's a true statement. So my question for the board is, can you provide us some transparency as to who drafted that statement? Was the public available to comment on that statement in your policy 1030? And when will be the opportunity to amend this policy and edit that statement? That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Mr. David Kolbinski.
This is a nice room. Good evening, Orange County Board of Education.
Good evening.
I've got a soft heart, soft place in my heart for Orange County schools. I had 5 kids go through in the 90s, and Steve was the principal. He was a good principal. My kids had an excellent education. Trish Randall was an excellent employee. And real quick, the oldest son went off to School of Science and Math. The oldest daughter was that year valedictorian. The other daughter who went off to play basketball, if you remember any of that, now a nurse supervisor over in some hospital. And my youngest son is still trying to find himself. So I became alarmed when I saw a video on YouTube in which a lady came to the Orange County Board of Education and said, this is a statistic for this group of people, this is a statistic for this other group of people. And without real critical thinking about it, two board members I respected very highly changed their votes. And they voted to pass a resolution, which I don't think people really, they voted to pass a resolution that said that Orange County schools were historically and systemically racist. I don't know that every taxpayer in Orange County, every teacher in Orange County knows that. Maybe the teachers do. But do you realize the implication of that? I took it harder because I was where you are in the 90s. I was asked to run for school board twice. And it was a wonderful experience. But what you don't know, it's probably before your time, is that after hiring William Harrison, he went on down to Cumberland County, ended up running the education system for us. His assistant was Andy Bridges, a wonderful guy. He was there for most of the time that I was still on, I was there for 2 terms. After I left, Shirley Caraway, that was the name, took over. She was still there when they were building Gravely Middle School. Did I fail to mention they were both African American? I served with Keith Cook, Dolores Simpson, and my good friend, Brenda. 90% of the American people say the country's headed in the wrong direction. If you go online, you'll see parents addressing school boards all across the country. What's happening? They rolled out a political agenda called equity. They're trying to take over
Mr.
local school
Kolbinski,
boards.
your 3 minutes are up now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
90% of Americans say you're going in the wrong direction.
You may step outside if you want to hear it, but we're continuing with the meeting. Thank you.
You know what? I'm gonna videotape it and I'm gonna put it on.
All right. That concludes public comment. And so it's time to discuss our consent agenda. We had originally 10 items on the consent agenda. We have moved off the second reading of new policies because it's actually our first reading for those two policies. And so, Dr. Felder, would you like that to be the last discussion action item?
It could be.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. And so, let's see, we have minutes, personnel report, third quarter financial service contracts and enterprise financials, historically underutilized business, third quarter reporting, equipment, materials, and supplies report, contract approval for SHI technology and the culturally responsive leadership professional development for school-based and central office leaders. Are there any items that board members would like to move to the regular agenda for further discussion?
Motion to approve?
Motion from Ms. Smiley,
Second.
second from Ms. Hauser. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you. Okay, Dr. Felder, we're on to our first discussion and action item about student transporters, and then that's going to be followed by the information item also with Mr. Albert. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board and public. I'm going to turn over to Mr. Albert, our transportation director, and then I'll pick up with the second topic here. So, Mr. Albert.
Thank you, Mr. Albert. Good evening, everyone. Chair, Vice Chair, board, Dr. Felder, everybody in attendance here, everybody listening. So we're here to advocate a little bit change in some incentives for our drivers and student transporters. This portion of the district is struggling a little bit right now, like it is all over the country. I mean, it's kind of, I hate saying it like this, but it is what it is right now. And these incentives, I believe, will help pull some more employees into Orange County schools. So I'm gonna just kind of hit the hot topics and stuff on here. If you have any questions while I'm talking, just please ask them. Those school bus switching on me. School bus transportation it's an essential component of effective and successful schools. You know, our school bus drivers and safety assistants, they play such a huge role in social and emotional. I could just stand up here and talk all day, but I'm not going to do that because I don't have a lot of time. So, but the Orange County Schools is committed to providing a safe and effective on-time transportation for all of our students here in Orange County. So in order for us to remain competitive, we need to recruit more personnel. So this is where we get into the incentive change for this year. Just say rundown of our department overview is a fully operational fleet in Orange County is 61 drivers and 9 safety assistants. So we currently have 44 drivers in the district. It's not hard to do the math on that one. Our buses travel 5,164 miles a day, running 162 routes with 41 buses right now currently and 44 drivers and 7 safety assistants, transporting 3,532 students. So our plate is extremely full. We'll need at least 17 plus drivers and 2+ more safety assistants to be fully staffed for the upcoming year. So we have hired 9 new drivers this year and 3 new safety assistants. So the incentives are working. So we would just propose a little change to the incentives to give it a little more meat and potatoes, if you will. A lot of this kind of mirrors the incentives that are in place right now with some minor changes. Paid medical examination fees, reimbursement for CDL license, annual retention bonuses for drivers entry level and 1 to 2 years of $250, 3 to 4 year drivers at $500, and 5 year plus drivers receive $1,000 for annual retention bonus. The $500 referral bonus is something that has been utilized, but I think it could be utilized in greater detail. I really don't think the district really knew that everyone in Orange County, every employee in Orange County qualifies for this incentive. So the referral bonuses are $500 after employees worked over 90 days. $250 for perfect attendance bonuses, and we have paid out many perfect attendance bonus money there. So that's been a good thing. Sign-on bonus tiers is $2,500 for sign-on bonus for drivers, $1,250 paid within the first 30 days of employment, and the next $1,250 paid after the 90-day time frame being employed. $1,250 sign-on bonus for safety assistants who can and will obtain a CDL driver's license so they can drive as well. They split that into 2 installments as well there. $600 sign-on bonus for safety assistants. Some drivers just can't obtain a CDL due to multiple reasons, but we still need employees like that as well. And the $1,000 technician tool allowance to be paid $500 in 2 installments. I'd like to keep that going as well. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Albert. I have questions, and I just really appreciate all that the bus drivers and transportation staff do and have done throughout the pandemic, and I'm so pleased we are growing what we offer them. But I have specific questions, but do other board members have specific questions? Bonnie?
Yeah, so thank you for this and thank you for what you do, and
Yes, ma'am.
looks good to me. I have just a couple of simple questions. One is how will it be funded? And then second, right now you have this very creative thing that you do where you let our bus drivers work in the cafeterias and they get paid so they can have more hours in the day. And are you planning to continue that? And if
Yeah, I'm not.
So right now, this year, we had incentive packages in place using additional federal dollars that were received specific to assisting in the schools. It's scheduled to end at the end of this school year. We've not had any discussions yet as far as the need to continue on. As Mr. Albert mentioned, not only a shortage with bus drivers, but we've also had a shortage of staff members with our child nutrition department and other vacancies within the schools. And so many of our classified staff this year had the ability to be able to pick up additional hours. What you mentioned was one of the areas in which we had drivers who absolutely did that. And they had done it during the pandemic. They had delivered food. They knew many of our families, our community, and our students. Delivering meals, so it was a really natural fit for them to work daily in the cafeterias as well. But we've not discussed as far as having additional incentives for them to be able to work additional hours during the day. Our focus will be for drivers who need additional hours is picking up those additional full-time drivers and getting them a full-time position within the transportation department to the extent possible.
okay, because the essence of my question is that program really, I think we're one of the few districts that wasn't having problems with bus drivers. And we have a shortage, but you did really fantastic, actually. So just curious if we're going to have to do more than this. That's really, so.
Sarah? I just want to echo the thanks, first of all, for what all of the drivers are doing. And I guess I was surprised to see that we had sort of a shortage in bus drivers, because my impression had been, we have like these other places in the organization that have been really hard to fill, but that like in transportation, we were kind of doing okay. So is this more about sort of meeting the needs of next year, or are we, yeah, I guess I'm surprised because I thought that we were doing all right in terms of bus drivers.
I think we're doing the best we can considering the situation, because we have a dedicated transportation staff who stop what they're doing on a daily basis and will drive a bus because they're all commercial drivers. Our mechanics have driven buses for us to get kids to and from school. Our fuel truck driver has driven buses to get students to and from school. Mr. Albert has driven buses to get students to and from schools. We certainly have had our struggles. We have not had to close any schools or shut down operations or schools based on the shortage of being able to operate. I think it goes to the dedication of employees in the Orange County schools. It's one thing that's always impressed me. We have individuals who love this community, who love this school system, who want to make sure their job is done the best they can, and they have struggled through this. As we look to next year, we just know we can't sustain that. We know we need to have a full fleet. We need to have drivers. We can't ask office staff to do their work at nights and on the weekends to catch back up after they get off buses. And so we've really made it through due to that. We've had safety assistants who have stopped being safety assistants to be drivers, and really support staff at the school level as well, helping and assisting. So yes, it certainly will not help us in the short term. The incentive package we currently have, which is the majority of what you saw on the screen, but what we're really making sure we're focusing on months in advance is being prepared for the next school year, making sure that we're bringing a fully staffed, full fleet of individuals within the transportation department. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I mean, just daily, our team is awesome. I mean, the quick thinking on our feet, thinking outside the box just to complete our task each and every day has been a joy to watch and to work with these individuals, because they truly are dedicated and awesome. So yes, we might make it look easy, but it's been tough.
I appreciate that candor. And I just want to say how much I appreciate your leadership of that department. I mean, the department used to have a lot of sort of turnover and things like that, and being able to see in the personnel reports, the safety assistants turning into full-time bus drivers and all of that stuff happening, as opposed to dealing with a lot of constant turnover, has been really awesome. So thank you for that.
I know Will had a question.
Yeah, so first and foremost, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for everybody in the transportation department, whether you're working on a bus, driving a bus. It's just incredible to be able to maintain the fleet. The question I had is, fortunately, we are now seeing students go on field trips. And so now we have activity buses, and I'm curious how those are being filled to do those activities. Is it harder to get people to do activities? Should there be incentives to make sure our students are going to be able to go on these field trips and be able to, learn outside the school?
Typically, providing drivers for field trips and things like that's a little out of my wheelhouse. It goes through another department. But as you say, yes, it is getting tougher because my phone is starting to ring for help. Do I have anyone that can help with this field trip? Do I have it, so on and so forth. So yes, that's a portion of it that's struggling as well. So yes, I would recommend it.
So is there something
for activity bus drivers as well?
Is there something we should be doing here to help?
So I think what we presented this evening were minimum recommendations. Certainly the board can add to, and certainly you make a great point about, as we look at incentives for drivers, any other drivers that are driving for us, activity buses, et cetera, put an incentive in. What I'd like to do, rather than just throw out a number this evening is if we can bring that back to add
Absolutely.
to that. But
Please do.
I do think that's an area that we could review and get more feedback as to what that might look like or should look like to be appropriate.
That sounds good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I had a question about the number of drivers. My understanding was one reason why we want those additional drivers, like the 17 drivers, is that we're wanting to shorten like bus route times, right? So it's not like we're short 17 drivers, but if we want to improve, our longest route, so it's not as long, we want to have more drivers. And so if I take that number, that we would want 17 drivers to do that ideally, and the fact that we hired 9 new drivers in the past year, is that net? Did we net 9 new drivers, or did we like hire 9 but lose some? We netted 9 new drivers.
We hired 9. We lost a couple to retirement. Moved
Okay.
on to TA positions in the district. So the county didn't lose these awesome employees. They just kind of shifted around. But yes, ma'am, we hired 9, but we have lost or shifted around a couple
Okay.
others.
So like we might almost need to be, maybe we're trying to hire 3 times as many as we successfully hire this.
Well, that's what our department has typically held. That is a fully staffed department. That's how many buses that DPI deems that we need to transport the number of students that we transport in this county. So what you said about the ride times and things of that nature, yes, ma'am, that directly impacts all of that. Our ride times, our arrival and departure times being, efficient and effective, being on time. It's been a very big struggle this year to get the students to school on time, and then in turn get them home on time as well.
Right. And to not have them have to wait so early in the morning for a long bus ride.
Yes, ma'am. About 85+% of my drivers right now are getting overtime every week, and they are working very hard, long
Okay,
hours.
thank you. And then another question, just for understanding for me, I'm thinking that we also need 2+ safety assistants. And so what does it mean that there are some safety assistants who are also drivers, and then there are some safety assistants who aren't drivers? So how, if you're a driver, do you also have time to be a safety assistant? How does that work?
So our safety assistants that we have, some of them have, or they still can obtain a CDL driver's license, but they just choose not to drive daily.
Okay.
They're like, in emergencies, they can legally get behind the wheel and transport students as well,
Gotcha.
but they just choose not to be an everyday driver.
And these safety assistants are on our buses that transport our exceptional students who have medical needs or other needs, and so we need that second trained adult on those buses. And so they don't ever perform both positions at the same time, but there are different pay scales. And so we wanted to recognize and clarify this year, upcoming with these incentives based on that tier that you fall, whether you're a full-time driver, you're a driver and safety assistant, or just a safety assistant that doesn't have the driving ability, that there was a difference in the breakdown.
Great, thank you so much. Other questions? Sarah?
Are we going to do a big marketing push around this after we approve these and get the word out? And good, because these are nice sign-on bonuses. I'm a little nervous about giving half of the sign-on bonus to the drivers in the first 30 days. That seems a little early, but if that's what other districts do, I'll just say if we find drivers are sticking around for 30 days and then leaving, maybe we might want to think about that timing.
Well, a couple of things there. I mean, we certainly talked about this several years ago when we went to the bi-monthly payroll, and when drivers are onboarded, missing a cycle on pay, and then how long it takes them to actually start receiving their first paychecks, and knowing that our drivers also who have part-time jobs, sometimes 2 and 3 jobs, and they're stopping that employment in order to start driving for us, it really does help to get that income incentive very early on for them. We monitor, and we also don't repetitively pay sign-on bonuses for people who come and then leave and then come and leave. So just there are some safeguards built into that.
Okay, well, if we don't have any further questions or comments, I take a motion to approve.
I move to approve.
Second.
Hey, again, this was just a bottom line. You feel, we can take it wherever you.
Take what you got.
Vice Chair Stevens and a second from Ms. Hauser, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much, and we look forward to future updates and potential requests.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Abley.
Sorry, I'm trying
Yes,
to get to my next item.
Mr. Albert, I just have to comment, when we were all out for Bus Driver Appreciation Day, it was amazing to see the team that you've created of the transporters. And, the camaraderie with each other and with you, it's just really amazing, and it's wonderful to see.
appreciate that.
Thank you so much for that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. And we're doing the work session item now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. All right, so leading into, we've talked about our school transportation fleet. We'll dive into a little more detail about on-time service delivery and a couple of areas that we're addressing. I just want to make sure I'm very clear for the public that's listening or any of our staff that's hearing about this agenda item tonight. This is just a draft. It's a work session. No voting will take place on this item this evening. What we try to do when we have topics that we know have a broad reach and impact, especially like this, it doesn't matter whether you're a parent, you're a staff member, member of the community, grandparent, caregiver, individual in the schools or outside of the schools. When we start talking about bell times, we know there's an impact across the board. We try not to have information going out into the community or asking individuals for feedback before we've had an opportunity to even bring the item or agenda before the board, so that you're aware of the information and the problem that we're trying to solve. So this evening's draft is about talking through why this is an important topic for us, the work that's going on behind the scenes, and then potential next steps that would take place of how we propose to address this problem. The goal being that we're a better organization and our schools are able to operate more efficiently, and especially our students who ride buses every day are able to get to and from school on time. And so we'll talk about that this evening. This is tied to our strategic plan and strategic plan goals. As Mr. Albert said, transportation is an essential component for us, and we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the schools and our students, but especially our parents. We know many parents rely on school bus transportation. Over 3,500 students, half of our school district, ride some form of school bus transportation for our students, either morning or afternoon. Some students ride both. They ride in the morning and the afternoon. And so we want to make sure that we have bus driver vacancies that are filled. That's what that last agenda item was about, making sure that we were fully staffed and we're able to roll. But the second thing is making sure buses arrive to school on time each morning, and making sure our buses are able to be at the school to pick up students on time in the afternoon. There is a domino effect with that as we start our routing, and we'll discuss that in a little more detail. But it's not only important for families who are waiting on students to get home, it's important to staff members who have to monitor and supervise students while they're waiting for school buses to come on the campus in the afternoon to pick students up. Complicate that with inclement weather, complicate that with students who are tired, they've had a long day, they've got homework to do, they've got jobs, they've got other activities and things to get to, and it starts interrupting schedules very, very quickly. And we know from social emotional health how that can impact you day after day after day if that's an issue. Transportation services are directly related to bell times. So we're going to talk a little bit about bell times and drivers for bell times. And we also want to look at academic performance of students, those students who continually missed the starting of the school day due to being late to school. Our average performance, and these service indicators are pre-COVID. We have not received an updated service indicator report. If you go online to actual abstract for this information, if you're viewing or listening, there's a link to the North Carolina Transportation Information Management System, TIMS. There's a service level indicator report. This information, this data points taken directly from that. The last one compiled across the state looks at all school districts across the state. Student ride times in Orange County schools was 85 minutes one way. It has not gotten any better with the pandemic. So 85 minutes was the average for students.
Just to clarify, I think it isn't. I think that's our longest
Okay,
bus
thank
ride
you.
time.
All right.
It's on a later slide, and I was like, that's the average? No,
Okay,
that's
thank
our
you.
longest, which is higher than the state average for the
Yes.
longest. Our average time is more like, is 28 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you for that
I
clarification.
was like,
So-
holy cow, all right.
So even as we look at the ride times, we want to shorten those as much as possible for students so that we can quickly get them from point A to point B and make sure that we're not causing any additional impacts as we move forward. School bell times are set based on the academic calendar to ensure the state law is met for student instructional hours over the course of a school year. For the 2022-2023 school year, the academic calendar in the Orange County schools is 174 student days. We've looked at an average instructional day of 6 hours, and that helps us make sure that we're meeting the minimum instructional hours of 1,025 hours. School districts have two options. You can go by number of days, 185 days, or 1,025 hours. It's very difficult to get the number of days in if you're just going by days. Doesn't really give much flexibility, especially with inclement weather or teacher work days or additional time needed within the calendar. And so most school districts utilize the hour option because it does give a little bit more flexibility. But those instructional hours don't count things like meal times, and they don't count things like the changing of classes, changing of the periods. And so we want to make sure we're always meeting our instructional hours and then having a little bit of time. And I think next year we have a little bit of time built in up to 3 days for inclement weather. And that was prior to option 2 that we'll discuss tonight. And we're still reviewing with the principals to make sure we're meeting our instructional hours with a little bit extra built in. And then state transportation efficiency is based on our routing and based on how we're utilizing our transportation services, primarily student travel times, fleet transportation, how many students are we actually putting on a bus. You know, it's not very efficient, you all can understand, certainly if you have a 72 passenger bus and it's driving hundreds of miles a day and only traveling with 2 or 3 passengers each trip, that just would not be very efficient. And so that impacts our rating. The state only recognizes one transportation agency per county. In Orange County, we're unique because we have both a county school district, the Orange County Schools, and we have a city school district, the Chapel Hill Scarborough City Schools. The transportation department is the fleet management for both school districts when it comes to transportation. So Larry's crew not only maintains the fleet for the Orange County schools, but also the buses in the Chapel Hill Scarborough City Schools, which is another 80-some buses that are there. And so we supply the mechanics, the fuel, et cetera. All that comes through the Orange County schools. They supply their own operations staff for routing, their own bus drivers, et cetera. When I reference information, and thank you, Ms. Smiley, for that correction, when we reference information to Orange County schools, transportation fleet, or transportation routing, we're only talking about Orange County schools. So I just wanted to recognize that. So when you look at that service report, it does break down Chapel Hill Scarborough City Schools as a separate local education agency, but we are combined when it comes to some state regulations. So the problems we're trying to address, again, getting the students to school on time, making sure we have drivers, we're being efficient in our routing, we're not losing funding based on how we're operating. But we also know there's many other factors that impact transportation on a daily basis. I'm not going to go through all of those that are on your screen, but you can imagine on any given day, we're dealing with multiple issues on that list, not just one, multiple ones. And when we talk about growth and development in Orange County, you can think about the impacts that this has on transportation services. And then as we have carpools and other traffic within school zones, it creates an issue for us trying to get buses on the campus and off the campus. And so when we talk about transportation routing, we also have to consider all of this. A good analogy, I've never been in a flight control center in an FAA tower at an airport, but I can imagine it's quite a busy place. That's what it's like on a daily basis in the transportation department, trying to route buses, make sure stops are taken care of, and then make sure all of these things are addressed. Our current bell times for this school year, you can see on the screen, elementary 7:50 to 2:50, middle school 8:30 to 3:45, high school 9 a.m. to 4:15. There were additional minutes added to the high school calendar ending time a couple years ago, and then I mentioned that service indicator report. So we did an analysis. Larry's team spent time over 6 to 8 weeks running different scenarios and looking at different options as we think about how can we route and how can we make some changes within the current transportation fleet. We also heard feedback from schools and principals over the course of the school year about those additional minutes at the high school, and could we roll those back when we look at bell times. We also looked at combining middle school and high school tiers as one solution, combining those, so rather than running 3 tiers, all buses are running for elementary, then they go drop students off at school, pick up middle school, drop them off, go pick up high school, drop them off. Rather than running 3 tiers, could we run 2 tiers? And we call that option 1. We're not recommending that, but that was one option. We also looked at geographical bell times, not having the same bell times across the district. Many school districts operate based on the region and based on the area, different bell times that may fluctuate amongst schools. We know in a small community like Orange County Schools, plus having staff members in multiple buildings and parents who have students in multiple buildings, whether those are choice programs or traditional programs, makes it a little bit more difficult to traverse the district if there were different bell times. And then the district also reviewed making adjustments to the current bell time schedule. That's the one we proposed making additional tweaks to, which keeps the 3-tier system, but makes the improvements. We talked about the driver incentives, but also our routing as well. So when we look at the 2-tier system, again, we're not recommending that, but you can see there's a host of issues there. And one of the biggest ones that stood out from feedback with school administrators that we talked about was the continual issue with traffic on High School Road. Not only would we have carpool students and staff all trying to come into those campuses and leave at the same time, buses, our transportation fleet, primarily uses the middle access roads in between. We have buses staged and parked. And then we also have to think about high school drivers who would also be caught in this traffic pattern back and forth. The roadway congestion is already difficult, let alone if we were trying to have both schools on the same schedule. I think you'd probably hear from every constituent and local authorities as well as to the difficulty that might conclude. Although it still should be noted, we will continue to review and look at ways to assess and address the traffic issues on High School Road, aside from this discussion with our local law enforcement partners. We've already been in discussion with DOT and looking at transportation and the service road, and can we reroute traffic as well. And so that will be a continued discussion to address that issue. Any questions about option 1? Because I'm going to skip it since we're not recommending it. Okay. Option 2 is the kind of recommended draft at this point in time, would be to make some adjustments to the bell times. Start the elementary school 5 minutes earlier. I know 5 minutes makes a difference for some families. We're trying to get those students to the campus. They would not still arrive any earlier. Our mark right now we use is 7:15 a.m. That's the point when buses arrive on campus and we start unloading our elementary students. We need to get those students off the buses, in, get their breakfast, get them settled down so those buses can get out of carpool traffic and off to picking up the middle school students. If we tried getting those buses there any later in the morning, they'll have difficulty getting on the campus and they won't be able to get off the campus with the amount of traffic. The instructional hours are changed. We do recognize that for elementary. We're still working with elementary principals. So I'm not, it may not, the final recommendation may not be exactly 2:25. It could be 2:30 or 2:35. But 2:25 would be the earliest we feel that we would be able to recommend based on what we know today. Middle school, just again, a minor adjustment there, 8:30 to 3:30. And then high school, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., taking those 15 minutes off. And, that really is the option 2, continue to tweak. Now, Mr. Albert has done other things, looking at how we can better be more efficient in this scenario with the right-hand turns, right-hand stops, left-hand stops, the number of backtrackings that we're doing. And we're still looking at, are there any areas where it makes sense to pick up, or we could pick up students from multiple ages? Right now, we don't pick up students. That for elementary and middle school, obviously, because the bell times are different. But in the future, that may be one option we would look at, especially if that would help ease some of the traffic at some of our schools. But that we're not recommending that at this point in time, but it is something we did look at. So, our proposal is we wanted to bring this information before the board tonight, get your feedback, and then we would send out surveys to staff and parents and get those comments back through the middle of May, and then bring final recommendations, draft version 1 to the board on May 23rd, and then any approvals in June, so we would have time to get those announced before Hillsborough Elementary School starts in July. So with that, I'll kind of back up because option 2 was the one we landed at for starting to make drafts to. We recognize it's not easy changing bell times. It's not easy changing school pickup times for buses. It's difficult. But what we're looking at is trying to make sure we're making improvements, because we cannot rely on the results that we're getting, which is students showing up at school late. Questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Alpley and Mr. Albert. And so, questions? Sarah? And then Will?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I am thrilled that we're going to be moving back the high school time to an earlier end time. I know that's been a big challenge, so I'm glad to see that we're making that change. I just have some concern about the elementary time being cut so much. The loss of the 20 minutes there. When I think about the meal, recess, transition to and from a special, and then just frankly, like the lost time at the end of the day to like get the coats on and go to the, dismissal and everything. I just really worry about the total amount of instructional time that we'd have there, and losing that 20 minutes a day feels challenging. So I think really relying on what we're hearing from school-based staff, I think is big. But yeah, I have some, I'm just not sure that 40 minutes is enough in an elementary school day for the meal, recess, and transitions. But I am not an expert on it. I just wanted to flag that seems very tight, and I don't know that we have the levels of speedy transitions every time at the elementary school level to make that work.
I will make just one brief comment about recess. So several years ago, the state board passed a policy recognizing and asking schools to ensure there's daily healthful living and there's daily exercise and things that are happening for students as a way to keep kids healthy in schools. At that point in time, they removed recess as the disclaimer of instructional time. It used to be when you calculate instructional time, it clearly said not including recess. That reference is no longer there because it's a healthful component to a safe school day, an effective school day as part of the curriculum. We do utilize instructional minutes can be counted towards that.
It's helpful. Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. Other questions, Will?
So I know one of the feedback that I've gotten a lot is the original 4:15 time. And beyond that, high school used to get out at 3:45, which is severely beneficial to our teachers and also students that are participating in extracurricular activities, because normally they have to leave their class or they're missing class. And I would personally like to see us try to get back to 3:45 to be beneficial at our high school and also allow our students to have more class time and not miss that when they have to go on athletic or other trips. And I do think it will help us attract and retain high school teachers, especially given the environment we're in right now. Thank you.
Okay, Bonnie?
So thank you for this. I want a +1 on Sarah's comment on the 20 minutes. And actually, it's more than that. It's not just the recess. On our crowded elementary schools, those kids are getting ready at 2:30 for a 2:50 bell time. So they're really losing a lot of time. So I'd like to see if we can protect that. And, you know, teachers are trying to figure out how to get their curriculum done in their time now. I also want a +1 on Will's comment on 3:45. If we can get our high school kids out sooner so they can, you know, because the teachers are complaining that sports is interfering with their last class of the day. So instructional, we don't want instructional time to have to operate on the bus schedule, right? So that's one thing. I'm fascinated by the decision to simplify the routes. If I'm reading it correctly, or we're cutting off some of I think of them as the capillaries on the routes so that you don't have to make as many stops. And I'm curious how much we have been able to reduce the route times, that longest 85-minute or so route time.
Yes, ma'am. So the right-hand pickups, that's whenever we put into Tim's and create a route, it has an option of right-hand pickups, left-hand pickups, both, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
So we always try to lean towards right-hand pickups, especially, well, it's not lean towards, high traffic volume roads, we pick up on the right-hand side and drop off on the right-hand side because it's safe. They don't have to cross the road.
Yeah.
So in the more rural areas, in the low traffic volume areas, we're going to start transitioning into both, whichever makes the route more feasible and short and more efficient. And then more corner stops as well. Instead of going, 2 houses down to pick another student up, go another house, pick another student, making a corner stop and things of that nature. And then, yes, that will in turn shorten route.
Right. And so I was curious if we had any idea of how much we're going to cut and whether it will help us. I remember with all the inclement weather days, bus service was a big issue, and I wondered if we've been able to cut out some of the roads that tend to get iced up, and so that we can keep school. No, we're not doing that. Okay, wishful thinking.
That would be a different
Just
discussion.
if I could, can I keep going?
One more, go ahead. So I have two more. One is on Orange Middle School, and maybe it's really a Dr. Felder question. One of the Orange High School Road concerns is that that middle school used to open at 7:30 for kids to drop off, and now it's opening at 8. And if we could open up school earlier, people can drop kids off sooner, and parents believe that will help with the traffic. And then finally, is there a way to combine, you've heard this loud many times, can we combine a couple of the Orange Middle, Orange High School routes?
No more questions. Thank you.
Okay, do you have, I know Stevens also has a question. Do you have any answers for Bonnie before?
Yeah, just I want to follow up on the high school at 345. So over the years, this is my 26th year, the calendar law has changed many times. It used to be 1,000 hours or 180 days of instruction. It's now 185 or 1,025 hours. So the requirements, the additional 5 days has made a difference in the ending bell times, but certainly we can review that. As far as the looking at how we can open schools earlier, that's really a principal school-based decision. I know with COVID, it has been very difficult to have any services extended just for the simple fact the hours of students on the campus and having students gather and and being in one location. You know, it used to be when I was a principal many, many years ago, sure, I took students in because I had a before school care program, but they went into the cafeteria. We only needed several staff members where they went in the media center, but they weren't in classrooms with an adult in every classroom because I wouldn't have had the staff to do that. But with COVID, we really can't concentrate or weren't concentrating students together. So I think there just would need to be some more discussion about what that could look like. And I don't know if I'd answered all your questions, sorry.
Right, so what my question is, would revisiting that 3:45 time affect the time that we're banking? You know, because we're banking and we haven't had to concern ourselves for years about Saturday school or makeup time. And that was because we were banking the time, but if we move our time to 3:45, will that affect that?
Yes, absolutely. And it will impact the time buses needed to reach the high school students. Because again, with the middle school getting out at 3:30, we're relying on the elementary buses for high school routes at that point because there's not enough time at 3:30 release at middle school to route students home and then go get them. Well, we might be able to look at a couple buses taking the middle school students, but then we have to hold them on the buses until the high school students get out, which the feedback was that's not realistic to be doing that every day to hold students. And so, yes, there will be a direct impact. That's why when I put the presentation together, we wanted to make sure there was an understanding of how much bell times impact and drive the ability for us to be able to transport students and get the buses routed in time at each level.
Thank you, I appreciate that because those of us who were around some time ago and with the superintendent, trying to figure out makeup days and Saturdays and such, that is a heavy lift and parents get really twisted about that. So I'd just like us to keep that in mind as we move forward.
And I will say, as far as inclement weather, right now, the legislation that was put in place for the remote learning days for inclement weather was for this year. That is not in the continuation that we know of now.
Correct.
And we're waiting to hear if that's going to be an option. So we right now don't have and can't just count on remote learning days because that's to be decided.
That's what I heard.
Okay, Will?
So I appreciate the clarity, or the other option is you could add more buses. And we could look at the cost offset if that was the trade-off of time versus transportation.
Yes, the district can and does have the option to purchase additional school buses off state schedule. There's a couple things to keep in mind with that. It's not just the bus. There's increased costs for drivers, maintenance, fuel, tires, all those systems, engine replacements that we would then be covering that the state would not, if we can find the additional drivers for the additional buses. But yes, that is a very valid point that school districts do have that option to add to the fleet.
Okay. So much for your presentation.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ooh, now I'm getting hot.
Okay, so now we will go back to our discussion action items. And I think we're holding the policy piece till the end. I don't think that affects staff as much. So we are now on reorganization of student services. Right, Dr.
That's
Felder?
correct.
Okay, great.
So would like to invite Dr. Doyle, Chief of Schools and Achievement, to lead this discussion.
Good evening, Chairman Doyle, Vice Chair Stevens, members of the Board of Education. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. And I'm in the same spot I was in last time, not being able to see the screen very well, because the older I get, the more these are essential, and that's not even helping. So I'm going to go for my presentation in my notes, so I would just ask for a little grace this evening. So you'll see on the screen our description of Goal 1, which is teaching tomorrow's leaders, and this is the goal for our district strategic plan. This goal is not only what our community has asked us for in terms of what they want for student learning, what we hear oftentimes in our public comment, but it's also what our staff, our Board of Education, and our students want for themselves. It's aligned to our school goals to improve student achievement, and the key strategy in this particular goal is around the multi-tiered system of support. And I'm here before you this evening to talk to you about one of the critical components of that multi-tiered system of support, and that is our student support services. Please make no mistake that the work that is being done by our educators in our classrooms every single day is the heartbeat of this system. But our certified staff who are supporting those teachers in those classrooms, as well as in our counseling offices and in our social work offices, are also ensuring that our students are successful. The work of student support services really is kind of in tune with the Maslow before Bloom's. And that means we cannot help a student learn until we really make sure that their basic needs are met. Many times our students come to us and they are struggling with many different challenges, and being at school is sometimes a feeling of safety, but also sometimes at school they're not feeling as safe, not because of the conditions that we may have created, but because of what they're bringing with them to our campuses. And so our student support services professionals are the ones that are really the first responders to those students in helping to meet their physiological needs, their safety needs, and hopefully helping them to get to the point of self-actualization. We all know that each of us is a work in progress, and these needs can be, we can be anywhere on the spectrum at any given time. But our student support services staff really is focused on ensuring that our students have those basic needs met so that when they're in the classroom, they can be attentive to the learning that's being presented to them. Our student support services really facilitates work in all three of our areas of multi-tiered systems of support. It helps to support our students' academic development. When you think of the school counselor, especially the counselor that's in the high school area, they are helping students to come into high school, understand their credits, and get to a point of graduation where they have earned not just the ability to graduate, but the ability to move on successfully, either in work, in college, or in military service. In addition, we have support for positive behavior. We want our students to be good citizens, both in our schools and in their community, and obviously when they graduate, so that they can be contributors to our communities. And finally, we want to support the social and emotional health and development of our students as well. And so our school counselors and our school social workers really do provide support in every aspect of our multi-tiered system of support. This is what that multi-tiered system of support would look like if it had kind of three legs on a stool. On the left-hand side, you see our academic supports. In the middle, you see the positive behavior, our classroom management systems. And on the right-hand side, you see the social and emotional learning that we want students to be able to leave our school system with. The bottom of our triangle is our core, what every student gets every single day. But then as students express or demonstrate needs to have additional support, that's when our school social workers, our school counselors, our mental health based support begins to kick in and provide additional guidance, support, assistance, and resources for our students and their families. And then at the top is where we have hopefully the smallest number of students needing that very intense support, but it also represents a great deal of energy and time to provide those needed resources for students. Again, our school counselors and our school social workers are intimately involved in each aspect of our multi-tiered system of support, and we can't really be successful at ensuring students learn unless we're successful in making sure that they feel comfortable being in our classrooms every single day. Social and emotional learning is at the right-hand side of that MTSS triangle. And the core is providing a consistent curriculum, which we are working on, and I hope to be able to bring you by the end of the May board meetings, a recommendation for a core curriculum, which will be the first time that we have something that's systemic K-12. I will tell you that our RFPs were due on Friday, and we had 5 respondents, so that's good. And we're getting ready to be in the process of having our teachers and our family members that want to be a part of evaluating that curriculum have the opportunity to give their say. That information will inform our work moving forward. But for the purposes of the public who is listening, and I know our board is very familiar with why social and emotional learning is so important, I think it's important for our school system to really define what it is we're doing with social and emotional learning. And this comes from multiple sources, but it includes the Department of Public Instruction. Our goal with social and emotional learning is to help our young people and our adults, that includes me, everyone who's in this room, to acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities. Do I feel good about myself? Am I able to operate my life, lead my family, have strong relationships, and be independent? Manage our emotions and achieve personal and collective goals. And this will come up in some of the data that I share with you in a few minutes, because this is one of the areas that we know we have some challenges with our students, particularly since the pandemic has really isolated our students. But it's also an opportunity for us to really provide the learning and the resources to students to help them manage those emotions. Feel and show empathy for others. This is an area that all of us can really benefit from, but also use some work in. Establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. And the right-hand side really is the framework for those key skills that we're trying to develop for students in social and emotional learning. For those of us who have been in education for a long time, this could be best characterized as what used to be called character education. But in character education, as you may remember, for those of us who've been sitting in these meetings for a long time, we were presenting information to students in character traits that seemed external to them. What we're doing with social and emotional learning now in our classrooms with our social workers, our school counselors, with all of the staff that are working towards helping our students develop these skills, is we are helping our students learn what the skill looks like, learn what it looks like to demonstrate those skills, and to really see positive benefits from utilizing those skills in their life. So it's not something external, it's something that we develop as human beings. And so why is social and emotional learning so important? Each of us, we work in a public education, but especially at the board level, and many of the folks who are watching us can attest as business leaders and owners and members of other work sectors in our community, that social and emotional learning is critical to the success of employees. If we bring in employees to our business or industry and they can't get along with each other, they can't work on a team, they can't think critically, and they can't manage themselves and their own emotions and reactions to stress or challenges in our workplace, they're not going to be successful. And that represents a significant lack or a significant investment that is lost when that employee is not successful in that business. And so Forbes, in an article that's linked or cited below, makes this statement in an article, and it says that social and emotional learning can help students better understand and identify their emotions. It can help them develop empathy, increase self-control, and manage stress. It also helps them build better relationships and interpersonal skills that will serve them in school and beyond, helping them succeed as adults. An emerging benefit of explicit SEL instruction is that it builds the emotional intelligence and agility that business and industry is starting to name among the most desired workforce skills. For both their well-being and their future economic opportunities, social and emotional learning is power for our students. Our state is telling us we are supposed to be helping our students develop these skills, but business and industry is telling us that they want graduates who have these skills as well. So, this data shows the challenges, however, that we've experienced in the last couple of years with regard to the social and emotional health of our students. Our social workers and school counselors receive referrals for support and assistance for students every single day. And to their credit, they log this data as a way to improve their work for our schools and for our system, but also to see how things are changing and developing in our system with regard to our students. What you'll see here is 2 years of comparison data, and that is 2020-21, so last school year, and the current school year. So please know this data was collected as of last week, and it's continuing to be collected. However, you can see the drastic increases in mental health referrals in specific. That's the left-hand column is really the full total of everything that's to the right. But with regard to suicide, we have an increase of 93%, which is alarming. It's alarming because it represents students who are feeling like there is no solution in their families, in their environment, in their communities, and in their schools. And our social workers and our counselors really are the first responders to help our students try to manage through those types of crisis and get to the other side, healthy and whole. And we can all understand with the isolation that has consumed our students over the last really 18 months of the pandemic, and then as we've come back slowly to in-person instruction, what that isolation has meant. But these numbers really tell the story. This work, however, also is an emotional strain on our staff, and it really does represent the challenges that they too are dealing with in trying to respond to these children who need our assistance. Also, I just want to come back to the social and emotional skills that we're trying to develop in our students and the discipline data that we saw a few months ago, or a couple of meetings ago, that really highlighted, with the exception of our high schools where attendance just is generally an issue, and really specifically tardiness, the big concern is student aggression. And that is evident in our elementary schools and in our middle schools. And this aggression, if students are not in classrooms that are serving students with exceptional needs, are happening in general education classrooms. And again, the first responders to support that classroom teacher are often the school social worker, the school counselor, the school principal, and any staff that can be of support to assist that teacher, but also really, most importantly, to assist that student in getting back to a point where they can really receive their education and the instruction that's being presented in class. In addition to all of this work supporting our students' mental health, developing our students' academic records, and helping students to navigate school so that they can be successful at graduating and getting to work, going to college, or serving in our nation's armed forces, our Student Support Services staff is responsible for our 504 compliance. And so, different from what happens with students with disabilities who are labeled as exceptional children, 504 is part of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and it's really a civil rights law that requires us to provide services to students who have a handicapping situation. And our school counselors are generally the staff on our campuses that are ensuring compliance with these 504. So if a student has a handicapping condition, it's creating a challenge or a barrier to learning for them because, one, they may have to miss school because of appointments, or they physically may be late to class. Those types of plans are being drawn up in our schools and supporting those students to make sure that those handicapping situations are not stopping them from being successful in their academic work. But the compliance around 504s is no less rigorous than what is expected for our students who have exceptional needs, and the plans have to be drawn up by the student's 504 coordinator at the school, as well as their teachers have to be a part of that planning, and the parents and the student as well. As you can see, 504s have just recently transitioned to student support services. As I said, they're managed and facilitated by our school counselors. We have 383 active 504s right now. And you can see, again, by no fault of anyone, we have some of those plans that are overdue because of the pandemic and because of challenges that have to do with a myriad of things, to include absences, the inability to get up with parents in some regards, or just getting the correct paperwork and those things together. We don't want those things to lapse. We need our students to have every support at the time that they need it so that they can be making progress through their academic work as successfully as possible. You can see here, I've really tried to make a case for the significant work that our school counselors and our school social workers are doing. In the description that I provided, we have one staff member who is devoted to student support services, and it's not me. And I want to clarify that. I'm just serving in a limited capacity at the absence of Ms. Cobb, who did a phenomenal job, and until we can get Dr. Dreyer, who will be joining us in the middle of next month. In my work with Ms. Cobb, as well as with my work with my two colleagues who are listening in and a part of this meeting with me, Ms. Avis Barnes and Ms. Kim DeGraffenried, who are our lead social worker and lead counselor respectively, those two staff members who are full-time school-based employees are coordinating the work of student services for Orange County Schools and have been for more than 6 years. But we have one full-time position. I felt it was really important to provide kind of some benchmark data about what student services looks like in comparable districts. You may say, and I'll look at my illustrious board member, Ms. Hauser, because she likes to ask this question, and I respect that she does. How did I come up with comparable? I came up with comparable based on around a similar number of students, and so you can see there is quite a range there, but definitely around a similar local per pupil effort. And that's the third column that is on this chart, and there's much more detail I want to tell the public online in the description that was linked at the bottom of this item. I encourage folks to read through that. You'll see that Orange County Schools has the third highest local per pupil effort in the state of North Carolina. And the number that's listed up there, I want everyone to understand, is from the statistical profile, which is on the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction's website. It lists every dollar that is both appropriated and spent in North Carolina's public schools. And this number does not include our federal funds, and it does not include our state funds. This is just our local effort, because that often is the differentiator. And so you can see Orange County Schools right now has a director of student services. You can see that Chapel Hill Carborough has 7 employees that are leveraged to support student support services. Asheville City Schools, which is a smaller, much smaller school district, also has 7. They are also the second highest local per pupil effort in the state of North Carolina. Chatham County Schools, which is number, I think it's 6. Thank you for helping my eyes. 6, Chatham County Schools. They have 6 employees who are serving student services. And then Mooresville Graded Schools has 3.5 for, again, a smaller number of students and one of the lowest of the list that I have here of per pupil effort. I make this case because, one, we have operated with a very slim staff and student support services for a long time. But our public, our community expects a very high level of service and support for our students. And it's not any small work to not just provide the support that's happening in schools, but to coordinate the multiple services that our community leverages to support our students from the outside, from what everyone would recognize as the Department of Social Services, the Orange County Health Department, but goes as far as many more groups in Orange County that really support our students, to include the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council, the Child Fatality Task Force, the Adolescent Parenting Program, Boomerang, and our school-based mental health services, and Porch Hillsborough, which supports our district food pantry, for which I believe our district really led in during the pandemic in terms of making sure that our students were fed and taken care of. Again, going back to making sure that our students had their basic needs met so that they could continue to learn. So I present all this information and make this case to the board to say a few last things. I'm very cognizant, and our superintendent is constantly reminding us about the board's reminders around adding staff, and that our citizens' tax dollars are critical resources that we are to use at the highest level with the greatest effectiveness and efficiency. That's their expectation. That is your expectation of us. And that's our superintendent's expectation as well as we're discussing these proposals in cabinet, which is why you'll see in the next slide that as we recommend 2 new positions and the expansion of our existing leads, as well as giving our schools some additional months of employment to support the academic support needed to help students during the summer, especially transition into our school district, capture the appropriate credits when they're coming from another school system. We do not have a large population, for example, of military students, but we do have a significant population, and those students come from all over the world and have transcripts that take a great deal of time to interpret and to assign the appropriate credit towards graduation. All of this work is being done by our student services support professionals. So we're asking that our 2 leads are finally recognized on a permanent basis for the work they've been doing for over 6 years. And that is to make them coordinators. That is not, though, to take them out of the schools. We do not advocate for that. We're really not advocating that any of these positions are at the district level. They will be in schools every single day. As you know, Ms. Barnes and Mr. Graffenreid serve individual schools. But in this regard, we want to make their work much more systematic, akin to the work in some regards that I'm doing with making sure that I meet with principals every single month. They need that opportunity to provide support to their school counselors or school social workers in the same way. One benefit of providing this is that these 2 staff members have interns every single year. And so their schools not only benefit from their expertise, but they also benefit from the additional human resources that are leveraged because of those interns serving with them. We're asking for a position to support 504s because this is a significant lift for our student services staff and because the compliance around it is critical, not just to satisfy the requirements of the law, but more importantly, to satisfy the needs of our students. That 504 coordinator would also be assisting with supporting our social and emotional learning, the curriculum deployment, and the coaching around implementing that curriculum in our core and helping our staff and schools develop supplemental support for that social and emotional learning as well. And then finally, a mental health specialist who will assist our schools in providing support to students who are having significant mental health challenges, but who are either waiting for referral for exceptional children's services or have a situation in their life that is creating a crisis that hopefully will not be permanent. As we listen to the challenges that our schools are having over the last several months, this school year especially, this is an area of great need. As we've seen many times where students are having crisis and whole groups of staff members are really trying to problem solve to figure out how to support that student before they're ever going to receive services for exceptional children, if that is the path for that child. And so, and sometimes that's not appropriate. And the needs for our school staff is to have expertise and additional research, resources, and strategies to leverage to assist those students. And so again, we would ask that these positions are not funded out of any new funds. We are reorganizing existing resources to provide this reorganization. So first, we are leveraging a local position that was allocated elsewhere to assist us with one of the positions. That position is not going away. The position that we are reallocating from, it will just be funded from a different funding source, namely Exceptional Children's Funds. Two, any positions in our operations budget that are leveraged specifically for capital project management can be attributed to the capital outlay resource. And so we can allocate those funds to that purpose and then use those local funds that are paying for those positions right now for student services reorganization. And then finally, this board at the beginning of the school year and for the online academy approved the appropriation of funds to provide an online curriculum for the online academy, which will no longer be needed as we are not operating that school after this school year. Those funds can also be leveraged to fill any gaps that might exist once we get this full reorganization completed. I do want to recognize that there are two amazing professionals who are way more adept at this work than I am, and that is Ms. Barnes and Mr. Graffenreid, and they remain available for questions, as do I.
Thank you so much, Dr. Doyle, for that presentation and explanation of the request. And board members, and I will remind us all to do one question at a time until everyone has an opportunity. Who would like to go first?
I first have a really basic question, and it was in the agenda packet about Renaissance, because part of the problem is Renaissance can't meet our need. And that's not a district issue, that's a school, that's a student issue. And I was curious if we've looked to see if there are other services, and maybe even talk to Orange County about counselors that are working with our kids already, and if there are other services in community that we can use. And I was curious, how Renaissance is paid?
I don't want to speak incorrectly, and so I'm going to look at Ms. Rath, who I said I would look at during my agenda item tonight, not for this reason, but who may be able to give me some information. If we don't have the correct answer, I will get it to you, Ms. Hauser. On the topic of finding other services, we have been actively looking. Some of that has been affected a bit by the transition in student services director. And if Mr. Graffenreid or Ms. Barnes has any information on that they know of, I'm happy for them to respond, and I will get you an answer if we don't have anything as far as the budget right now.
Okay, Ms. Rath, you have a follow-up. Will?
So thank you for all the background on this and information. One of the things for me is when I read through this originally, I was thinking back several months that we had a discussion about this, and I actually found it back in December 13th, where we talked about the assessment and backlogs being behind because of school closures and unfilled psychologist positions. And at that point, we approved 4 educational dietitians and then 2 primary support TAs to monitor students during these assessments. And then we also approved, back on that 13th, a behavioral interventionist specialist. So how do all of those fit into this? Because we've already put those in place. Did those not meet all the requirements, and that's going to be in addition to this, or are they going away and these new positions are permanent? I'm just trying to, we get a lot of information, and I'm just trying to understand as we've talked about it before and how they fit together.
And that's a great question. I do want to clarify, and I brought this slide back up so that you can see the top of this triangle is on the left-hand side is IEPs, the middle part is behavior intervention plans, and the right-hand side are therapy services, which really are mental health. What you described, Mr. Atherton, were the exceptional children's services, which is separate from the student support services. So those exceptional children's services positions were requested to help get our exceptional children's testing backlog fixed, but this 504s are a separate requirement. I hope that answers your question.
It does. I thought the original did cover 504s, so it didn't. It only covered the IEPs, if you will.
So 504 plans were overseen by EC for a period of time, but that is not where they should reside. 504 plans and IEPs certainly have the same goal, and that is to help children thrive, but they are under 2 very different laws and operate differently. And so 504s shifted to student services.
Okay.
And so,
okay.
Mr. Atherton, no, they were not talking about the 504 backlog during that time. It was just for EC testing.
So I guess the follow-on question I'd have is, once the backlogs are done, are these positions going to continue, or do we think the backlog's going to be along for a while?
Can I speak
Did
to?
you want to speak to that?
Sorry,
Dr. Dawson?
I'm just curious
it's fine.
as we think about, going into budget.
Let me speak to
season and
student
everything.
support services. Right now, there's no one who's tasked with specifically coordinating 504s, except that it moved to the new director, which is not really sustainable. And really, to be honest, Ms. DeGraff and Reed is the one that's coordinating that work for the entire district. So even though we may not have a backlog, and I promise you, Ms. DeGraff and Reed is a bulldog and she's a taskmaster and she's going to get this fixed, she still needs to have the time, or someone needs to have the time to really not just focus on compliance, but focus on excellent services with regard to our students who have handicapping conditions. So that's the 504 answer.
And in regards to the EC diagnosticians, we'll always continue to review the funding source for those positions, but ideally what we would like, once we're all caught up, and I know there's an update coming up for you on that, the hope is that we may keep them on to continue to support our teachers as they are doing the paperwork and all that entails for IEP meetings, to help alleviate some of the work and to take some of that lift off of the teachers. We're hoping to keep those positions on to be able to support that.
Okay, thank you for the clarity.
Thanks. Sarah, and then I have a question also.
Great. I have a number of questions, but I will ask my one. First, I just want to say that I found this entire presentation to be incredibly, incredibly thoughtful and well put together and well reasoned, sort of across the board. So thank you very much for that.
Thanks to Ms. Barnes and Mr. Graff and Reed.
Thank you so much to both of you. I can't see you.
They're
but thank you.
virtually joining us. They have children that they're trying to get to bed and those types of things.
Thank you. This was, it was great. I guess one simple clarifying question. The counselors that are part of the proposal, the school level, middle school and high school, is that adding months of service to existing roles, or is it adding additional positions?
It's adding months of employment to existing counselors.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So my question was kind of along those lines. So Ms. Barnes is our lead social worker and Ms. DeGraff and Reed is our lead school counselor.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and so I was thinking about the fact that, I was just curious how that time works for them. I know that we used to have lead nurses rather than like a district nurse role like Ms. Sylvia Compton fills now. And so I was just curious about the time demands on them serving both at their school site level and at the district level, which apparently they've already been doing.
For several years, yes.
And so this is recognizing work that they're doing. Okay.
And I would also say that I want them to speak to this issue, but I do want to say their work is 24 hours a day. This weekend on Saturday, I was on a call with Mr. Graff and Reed around an issue with a student who was having a significant crisis. So these folks are working 24 hours a day to respond to crisis around mental health and student support. And even if the school's assigned counselor is not responding, these two women are. So I do want to give them a chance to respond if they're available.
Yep, I know. Bonnie will be next.
They're gonna. Ms. Barnes or Mr. Graff and Reed, do either of you want to respond?
Yes, good evening. I'm sorry I'm not able to be there with you tonight. I have a 6-year-old daughter that I had to get to bed. But yes, one of the things, I've been doing this job for over 6 years as the lead social worker. And I'm thankful and fortunate enough that every school year, in order for me to do the work that I do, I always have 2 master's level social worker interns work with me that are able to support me as I do the work and the demands that are necessary for Orange County schools. I love Orange County. I haven't left. This is my 22nd year. Dr. Doyle is correct. My work seems like 24/7 because I feel that, my responsibility to Orange County is to make sure we put our children first and making sure that their needs are being met.
Thank you, Ms. Barnes.
You're welcome.
Bonnie?
Yeah, so first I'll say I am completely supportive of the 12-month contracts for the lead social worker and lead counselor. I think it's a great idea, actually. Not quite sure on the others, but probably. But I'm choking a little bit, as you could imagine, on the 2 district positions.
They are not district positions. So they will be
mental
at,
health counselor and the 504.
they will be based at a school and will be serving schools daily.
Yes, so here's the problem I'm having. We have schools that are really underwater on behavior and discipline. And that is an everyday occurrence. And then just to make things a little bit tougher, because of our enrollment decline, we're going to be cutting some of the staff and so reducing some of the staff in some of the schools. So my question is and I honestly don't know if they want more counselors or social workers, or if they want more TAs to just cover the behavior problems. And so I'm just hesitant to add positions that are not helping them on an every single day basis to do their job. So I'm just going to.
No, Ms. Hauser, I appreciate your question. I appreciate the comment. And I will say that the expertise that this employee that we hire for this position will exceed what the general classroom teacher has in terms of their training. In addition, I think sometimes we over-rely on our teacher assistants to provide support to students for which not only have they not been trained, but they are reticent to provide. So a teacher assistant serving in a capacity to support a student's significant behavioral challenges is really asking too much in some regards. And so we need staff that have the expertise to support those teacher assistants if they're in that position, but also to support our teachers with specific strategies to assist them in their classrooms. We have staff that provide that service specific to students that have exceptional needs, but we do not have that staff to provide that support to our staff who are serving students who have mental health challenges for which they don't have a designation of exceptional child.
Sarah, I know you had an additional question.
I did. Thank you. So one is a quick side note. The selection of the SEL curriculum, the EC department is deeply involved in that as well?
Everyone.
Okay.
Everyone who wants to be a part will have an opportunity to weigh in on that curriculum. We have a group of teachers and some are counselors as well, from one person from each school who will be the first committee who will get the presentations in person. We hope to do that in the next week. And then we will record those presentations and send them out to every school and give every staff member the opportunity to review those presentations and rate those curricula. And we will use all of that information to inform our recommendation to the board.
Great. It was just occurring to me that for EC students, often a curriculum has like special adaptations and, particular modules and and so wanting to make sure that
and that was something that our teachers brought up, as well as our parents did, in terms of the feedback that we received from them, is that they wanted to make sure that there were differentiations for not just students that have special needs, but students who are English as a second language, or students who are advanced. What can we do to make sure that we're addressing all of those needs?
More questions? Bonnie, you've been the one.
I think we're talking about 2 different things, because I understand the counselors, and I would love an answer on the Renaissance thing, because I thought Renaissance was being paid through health insurance, Medicaid or private insurance. I didn't think, right, am I?
Ms. Rath may not have an answer tonight, but that's something she
Okay, but
can get back to you
I
on.
didn't know if we were paying for it or versus it was getting paid through. And if I have a counselor come in, Medicaid, well, for some of our students anyway, we'll pay for those services. And it's not one person. Our needs are so great that one person is going to barely make a dent in it. But what I'm hearing in the schools is, they have kids melting down because they're second in line. Really tough stuff that is not a counselor, it's before the counselor intervention, it's just behavioral interventions. So just
and that is the position that is on the right-hand side here, which is the mental health case management.
Right, and my point is, I don't think one position is nearly going to cover.
Now, Ms. Hauser, if you want to give me 14
Well,
positions,
the question is,
I will take
well,
them.
I've got hundreds of people working in the schools.
Absolutely.
And every single one of them is doing what, and it's really so amazing. And just to, spoiler alert, I spent years in schools with a dog, working with the counselors and the social workers and the resource officers and child protective services and others working with these kids, with the kids and it wasn't nearly what these folks are doing now, but to see the way a school community will come together for the students because they know them so well. And that's
I understand what you're saying.
I take that to the bank.
Yeah, and Ms. Hauser, I don't want to make sure, I want you to make sure that you know that I'm understanding what you're saying and that the school-based staff has the most knowledge of that student and their significant needs. What we propose in this particular position is when the school-based team, they've exceeded the resources or the strategies that they've tried every single thing that they can, and they are not getting anything else, this person is going to help with case management and to identify additional resources that may go beyond what we're already providing in our district. And that's the challenge right now, is that we do have many students where that is the situation, and our schools really are asking, for help, and we really need the resource to provide to them.
Can I add one thing? Yes. Bonnie, I wanted to share with you, I think this was in a presentation in the fall that Renaissance was being prioritized for students who didn't have private insurance, which makes sense in a lot of levels, but that means there's still a very profound need in school buildings. So I'm just
so
thought
the
that might be helpful context.
Thank you. The answer is we need it all.
Yes.
Right? And so.
And I apologize that I don't have the exact answer for Renaissance, and I should have, so I will definitely get that information. Dr. Felder's
We
trying
have
to.
one now, and so Renaissance Wellness is funded through GEAR, and GEAR are the relief funds, COVID relief funds via the governor.
Which will expire at some point, is that correct, Dr. Felder?
Yes,
Yep.
that's correct.
So, Sarah?
Sorry, when do those expire?
2024. 2024.
Okay, so if we don't have any further comments or questions, I would take a motion for this recommendation from the superintendent that we approve the reorganization of student support services.
So moved. Second.
A motion from Ms. McKenzie, a second from Vice Chair Stevens. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Thank you so much for your thorough presentation,
Thank
Dr.
you very
Doyle,
much. I
and
appreciate it.
for Ms. Barnes and Mr. Graffenreid for joining us tonight remotely.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. Okay, Dr. Felder, I think we are ready for the conversation about the proposed board meeting calendar and board members. That's why we have several different sheets. Dr. Felder, are you going to lead this conversation?
I most certainly can do that. Board members, you should have a copy, 3 copies of the proposed calendar for next school year.
We actually have 4, so we have.
Oh, I'm sorry, you have 4.
We have
correct.
it sort of as is with Mondays, and then we have if we were to change to Tuesdays or
Right.
Wednesdays or Thursdays.
Right, so you have 4, one reflecting meeting dates that would continue on Monday, the next one reflecting meeting dates on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. So at your retreat, you saw the first one, the one that reflects your current meeting day schedule, and that's on Mondays. These also outline winter break dates, spring break dates, and holidays. You will note that on each of these calendars, there is one meeting in November and one meeting in December, which is the current schedule.
And we also noted in our, when we discussed this at the retreat, that we have the traditional year, spring and winter breaks on here because that is working with our staff schedule. So we realize the year-round calendar is not on here at the moment, but we're focused on board meetings that we would plan with staff. And so we can, do you have more you want to say, Dr. Felder? Do you want to open it up for?
Would love to open it up for any discussion or questions with regards to what is being proposed for next school year.
Okay, so maybe if each of us could offer a comment, it would be good to hear from everybody in regards to your thoughts on changing to one of these other days of the week. Will?
So after that meeting, I was very hesitant about changing the date. And I went back and looked at my calendar for the past year, and there are so many school events that occur on Thursday, band concerts, chorus concerts, theater productions and stuff. And so personally, I would not want to move the meeting to a Thursday because I want parents to be able to come to our meeting. I want to go to those events. And so that's just where I landed based on seeing where these events normally landed during the week.
Sarah?
I agree with Will that I think Thursdays doesn't make sense. And I think we heard from staff that having it not on a Monday could be helpful in terms of their planning and not feeling stressed about it all weekend or working on their presentations all weekend. So I am in favor of moving it off of Mondays. I have a slight preference for Tuesdays, not based on much of anything.
Well, I didn't hear what you said.
I said I have a slight preference for Tuesdays, but it's not based on much of anything. I'm not quite sure why.
I like that.
So it's not a strong opinion. I just, I think Tuesdays or Wednesdays are where I would go.
I definitely wanted to echo the concern from staff. I think it makes a lot of sense not to have Monday night meetings. Does the BOCC meet on Thursdays? Tuesdays.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
meeting tomorrow.
So I do think that's a consideration because I think there are times that folks are going to want to be able to attend both of those meetings. But really, whatever y'all want to do is good with me.
Bonnie?
Well, I don't mind any of the days. I don't like Tuesday, and don't like Thursday. So on the Monday, and I really am hearing the staff concern about Monday. And I think we all experience it ourselves because we're all reading all this stuff over the weekend, and I wonder if we did better planning for our meeting, so we had less new material coming to the board and more of the new material in committee, that would ease some of the stress on the staff.
I appreciate that, but I don't think so. It would not.
Then I don't care.
Brenda?
Well, I believe that we need to stand clear of Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesdays, because if you have it on Tuesdays and the commissioners are meeting here, we're going to be in competition for the spot, so the answer would be no, because they, this is their spot. And then Thursdays, for the reason that Will said, and so I'm gravitating to Wednesday, but I guess it doesn't make any difference. Yes, it does. I was thinking about me being gone. I'm leaning towards Wednesdays.
Okay. My thought is I do think it is a benefit to staff to not have it on Mondays.
Right.
And one point we had discussed in the retreat is if we were to move it away from Mondays, that we would want to make sure we still had the materials in advance of the weekend, because board members with full-time jobs have a hard time getting through all the material if we were only getting it during the week. So I know we had that kind of assurance from Dr. Felder that we would still get our materials before the weekend, regardless of which day it were picked. So for me, moving it off Mondays, I definitely hear the concern with Tuesdays. Wednesdays or Thursdays are fine. I could imagine that some of those concerts, maybe they would schedule them not on Thursdays if we have a board meeting, but I'm fine with Wednesdays or Thursdays.
Right.
So go ahead.
Ms. Dubison, does that work for your schedule?
Oh, yes.
Either Wednesdays or Thursdays, is that right? Wednesdays or
And
Thursdays.
If my memory serves me correctly, and Ms. Dubison, please correct me, I believe you also agreed that Mondays are more
Moving off of
problematic.
Monday would be preferable, yeah.
Okay. So it looks like more people like Wednesdays than Thursdays.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of moving it off Monday just because of my work, but I'm willing to do and figure it out for whatever the majority of board would like to do.
Thank you, Will. So do we have further points people want to make, further discussion, or does someone want to make a motion?
I just, one additional point, which is I see we have just one meeting in June, which I know we've discussed. I do think it's possible that, as we get closer to that, that it'll feel like we have enough business to need to do 2 meetings in June. So I think in the past, we've done 2 meetings in June. Right now, it's just one, and it's tricky with the end of school and the professional development for school administrators and teachers. And, I know there's like a leadership academy of some kind happening for administrators this year. This isn't until next June. I'm fine leaving it with the one. I just think, there may be a need for another meeting because there's still a lot happening.
Did you say there's one meeting in June?
In June, yes.
Why do I have the 14th and the 27th?
On the Wednesday calendar?
On the Wednesday?
Well, maybe it's just planning I'm doing in isolation.
No.
I also wonder if we should put the reorg in July 2023. It would be I guess it would be the Wednesday rather than a Monday then. Is that in policy that it's
It's in
a
policy.
Monday?
That I remember.
Policy.
It is in
It is
policy.
in policy.
That's in
Yeah,
policy.
on
Is,
Monday
what
anyway.
I don't know is whether that's because it was in your local legislation or if it just says the first board meeting, so I'll have to.
Yeah,
check
just
on
said the
that.
first, we did that.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to have it on Monday,
Yeah,
it's fine.
we just did it ourselves.
In regards to June, I know we talked about how people thought we maybe would need a second one, but we didn't have it on the calendar because we were avoiding that leadership week. And then, for example, there's Juneteenth. So I think we just were going to have some conversation around what day that would be. I think we talked about even having 2 weeks back to back, if I remember correctly, for June. Am I remembering that correctly?
Hold off until it gets closer to that point,
Yeah.
personally, to think about if you need the second one.
I agree, but I would like to officially put the reorg date on there, just so it's known, right?
Yeah.
That it's going to be the 10th or the 12th, whatever we want to do. I think makes sense to officially announce
Okay,
it.
I'm sorry, your board meeting just says it'll be your first meeting in July. It doesn't say the first Monday in July.
Right.
Right, that's what I was saying. I want to set it. I don't care what day it
Right.
is, just so
Yep.
it's on our calendar. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
I did note, as we were looking at these calendars, that depending on, if you adopt one that's not on Mondays, that the motion should include waiving policy to adopt this calendar, and then we'll have to amend your policy, because right now it says Mondays. That's policy 2300.
And this July 2023, if somebody put us in here on July 4th.
No, that's actually a holiday.
That's a holiday day.
That's
just
okay,
a
because it's a
day.
holiday.
I was like, do I
I
care?
thought that too.
Like, what?
You're going to come celebrate the holiday with us.
Oh,
Brenda, at the
sure,
board
that's what
meeting
I'm
on the
going to
4th.
do. I can't wait.
Okay, how about I make a motion?
What date
Make
for
it.
July?
How about the 12th?
Perfect.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna motion to approve the board meeting calendar with the Wednesday dates, waiving policy 2300, to waive the portion about meeting on Mondays. We're gonna meet on Wednesdays, and including an organization meeting, whatever it's called, on July 12th, which is the first Wednesday that's not the day after the 4th of July.
Second.
Motion from Ms. Smiley and a second from Vice Chair Stevens. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Great teamwork, board.
Oh, yeah.
And we are right at 27 minutes. I know we all want to get out of here on time. And so I think we're talking about the robotics grant.
That's correct.
Dr. Felder?
And Dr. Dawson will lead this discussion.
You want to do it?
Motion to approve grant.
Second.
Oh,
A motion from Was that from Mr. Atherton?
Yes, that was.
And a second from Vice Chair Stevens. All in favor?
Is there any discussion of the item, or? I do have one question.
Well, you can have a discussion.
Go ahead. Discussions are allowed.
I
after
just
the
wanted to
motion.
understand, I know that members of the robotics team were very interested in this grant and that you were also interested in this grant. So have you collaborated on this grant application? You've worked together to submit this, yes?
So we will. The reason why we're bringing it tonight is because we, per board policy 8210, for any grant submissions above $5,000, we need board approval.
Right.
And the next board meeting will be after the deadline for us. And so that's why we're bringing it tonight.
Right.
But we are very much interested in expanding our after-school robotics programming to more schools. But it does require collaboration with all of the schools. But like, we already have a couple schools that have expressed an interest. And so we will be collaborating with school teams because we do need their commitment, because it will require, that from their schools. So yes, we'll absolutely collaborate. We'll put together a proposal that will be inclusive of all the schools that want to, and then put a little bit more above and beyond just providing equipment. So that's why we know for sure it'll be over $5,000 request. We don't know yet exactly how much. But once we are finalized, we'll definitely provide an update.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I just
And-
wanted to make sure that this was being done in collaboration
Yes.
with the.
And there is
Absolutely.
already a mentor collaborating, Mr. Mitchell, right?
Yes.
Has been working with.
Yes, and we do have a
Dennis
number
and-
of
That's all I wanted to
Right.
staff that are already involved with the FIRST Robotics, so we will be leaning on their guidance to support.
Great.
I made the motion, Ms. Stevens seconded.
Any
Correct.
further discussion? Okay.
Oh, thank you so much for your support.
All in favor?
Appreciate it.
Aye. Any opposed? Great.
If you want to stay and present something, you can, but we won't be here.
I think you have another presentation, so I'm gonna go.
Dawson, that was just.
Be
she was just
disappointed. You
a-
know she's disappointed, Mr. Atherton. Something. That was a
Okay.
fast move.
I 100% support.
I do
the
too.
program.
I do too. We support the robotics.
They did win an imagery award at Worlds
Oh,
on
great.
Saturday, so they got further recognition while they were there. Okay, so now we just have from our consent agenda, the policies that were actually not second reads. This would be our first read. And Eva, are you taking the lead on these?
Sure.
That would be great.
We have two policies here. The first one is 7100. This was part of the backlog of policies that had fallen out of date. And so these updates are to match the current School Board Association model policy, and in particular to incorporate some new requirements under DCDEE for our childcare classrooms. Some of our pre-K classrooms are regulated as childcare centers rather than as K-12 classrooms, and so they have some special rules.
Okay. Any questions about policy 7100? Sarah?
Yes, I wanted to ask about in the nepotism section. It seems like we have, with this language, narrowed it so that the sort of disclosure of relationships no longer includes assistant principals, but only principals. And the sort of the sort of potential consequences of not conveying a relationship. So I guess I preferred when it said that there was a consequence and when it also included assistant principals, but could anyone explain?
Sure. So my assumption is that the board's prior policy, the board had elected to be stricter than the law. You could elect to continue to be stricter than the law. This was merely to show what the legal updates, like the School Board Association model policy hugs, as Jonathan would say, the statute. If you prefer to continue to have a slightly higher standard in Orange County schools, that is completely fine.
So, and I apologize, I wasn't able to come to the committee meeting where you all discussed this, but I mean, I prefer to have a higher standard. You know, to me, an assistant principal is also a leader in a building, and it would be helpful. You know, I think it's important for the board to understand those relationships as well. And then, you know, the piece about someone who fails to disclose may be subject to disciplinary action. Maybe I wouldn't include up to and include, I don't know. Well, I don't know. Maybe condition, maybe I would leave that just in case. I'm in favor of keeping that. And I know not sticking exactly to the model policy makes it more challenging for a board to sort of stay updated, but that's my preference. How about others?
Will?
I completely agree with having us set a different standard.
Okay. Any other comments on that?
So we would retain the reference to APs and the statement about what happens if you knowingly fail to disclose.
Yeah.
Works for me.
Right. Okay. Do we want to, so this is just our first read. Do we want to talk about the second policy, or do we want to entertain a motion for this policy first?
We can take them together.
You can do them together.
Okay. All right. Second policy then, please, Eva.
Sure. So policy 4720 is your policy on surveys to students. And the question about revising and updating this one actually came through Ms. Doyle, I think, from Family Success Alliance.
Okay, so this policy, the request to have this changed has to do with our youth risk behavior survey, which is like the nationally used survey in school districts across the country. And so this was recommended through our SHAC committee. Some of our community partners like Guyan Chambliss with Orange Partnership and a number of other people in our group advised that other districts in the state have passive consent, so that you'd have to opt out rather than active consent, and it can change participation from, like, some of the examples they sent, like 60% of students participate in the survey versus like 6% of students. So having this, the policy is only required to apply to Department of Education surveys, I believe, and the Youth Risk Behavior Survey is outside, it's of the Department of Education, it's a CDC.
This policy reflects in part something called the PPRA, now I've forgotten what it stands for, but the something rights amendment. And it has to do with, as you said, Department of Education funded surveys that hit on certain topics. And previously, the OCS policy extended those limitations to any survey. Again, going beyond the minimum requirements of the law. And so when this topic came up, I pulled the most updated version from the School Board Association just to look. And so the strike-throughs that you see here reflect converting to their most current format, but the substantive change would be that instead of saying before a student participates in any survey, that there had to be active written parent consent, that it would be before they participate in a Department of Education funded survey. And it still requires the opportunity to opt out. And I don't believe that the Youth Risky Behavior Survey is required. It is something, I mean, and what I mean is students are not, it's not a grade, it's not, it's a voluntary thing. Yep. But obviously, if you have to get an active consent sign, that can, children just don't bring them back. So that was the origin of this change, and the policy committee was in agreement.
Yeah, as a parent, it took me forever to sign my kids' youth risk behavior survey things, even though I intended to. We almost missed the
And I
window
will
on that
note that
myself.
the youth risk behavior survey is not a new thing. It's been going on for 20 or 30 years. If you went to school in North Carolina, you probably filled it out. I know I did.
Yeah. Okay, Bonnie?
Well, I think this one is about trust. And to me, it's a two-edged sword, because many of our surveys are not getting to our Hispanic families, they're not getting to our low wealth families, so we're not hearing from them. But, I also have this thing that we haven't asked for permission. So I don't know if we err on the side of communicating better to make sure these parents know that we'd like their kid to participate in a survey, or or do we just assume that it's okay? And I'm not so comfortable assuming that, or at least I'd like to hear from them. I'd like to talk to our FSA navigators. I'd like to talk to our family relations folks. I'd like to talk to our school social workers, because they have plenty of time, right? I'd like to talk to our school social workers and counselors and see if they can get a read from parents about how they feel about us assuming that it's okay for their child to participate in a survey if they haven't opted out. So that's one thing. Panorama is a really interesting situation for me, because to me, that's more of an assessment than a survey. And I wonder, that one to me really feels like something that shouldn't be, that I feel very comfortable with an opt-out. The youth risk behavior is the other side. The youth risk behavior survey, which is important, is not a survey for education, and it's going out from us. So it gives the impression that it's an educational-based survey. And I got several, and I think it's an important survey, but some of the parents were very uncomfortable with the questions being asked of their kids. So bottom line, if it's educational and then I'd like to hear from our parents if they want to opt in or out. And on outside surveys, things that people are using us to get to our students, but it's not for our benefit, our direct benefit, I think I'd always like to have that as permission required. So that's kind of where I am on it.
Okay, other board members?
For clarity, students can still opt out of taking the surveys, even if they are, okay.
Will?
So I just want some clarity around this. So the way that I read it, and this is just a lack of my knowledge around this area, is so there are surveys that are mandated, and then there are surveys that are not mandated, right? So
It is mandated for the school system to administer them, or that individual children would be mandated?
well, I'm just reading the wording where it says, before a student is required to participate, concerning protected topics, the parents or eligible student must provide written consent. But then the second sentence says, if prior written consent is not mandated for the survey involving protected topics, how does that get determined that it's not mandated?
Because it's not funded by the Department of Education. That would be the category that is mandates prior written consent. For other surveys, prior written consent is optional, but we would always offer opt-out.
So I'm just going to throw this out here as, that means like if a political party came up to us and wanted to ask all students about their political affiliation, we wouldn't have to ask the parents first based on what that's saying.
Well, I think that would violate some other policies.
Yeah, well, but when you read it, that's what it comes out as, right? Is there, because it says, protected area doesn't require parent consent. And that doesn't feel good to me to say that.
No,
protected information as a parent,
I can understand that. I do want to say that, so that we don't put that out there, there are other policies that would prohibit
Right.
administering surveys on behalf of a political party.
And all of these surveys are at the discretion of our superintendent, who we trust. So that's me.
I would just say it's not about trust of the superintendent. It's about making sure that our parents know what we're asking their children to participate in.
But never administer a survey that parents were not informed about.
Right.
It's just the hurdle of, getting people to take the time to do it. There was a lot of communication about the youth risk behavior survey. I mean, I got so many communications as a parent, but there's just the hurdle of taking the time as a parent to fill out this form.
But our Spanish parents didn't get nearly that intensity of communication. Our Lowell's parents are not getting nearly the intensity. They're not checking their emails. We've heard this. We've heard that many of our families say they don't get our emails at all. We've heard them say that repeatedly. And I think, so why are we so sure? How do we know if a parent didn't comment? Is it because it's okay with them, or because they didn't know the survey was happening? We just don't know. I'm not.
So
Dr. Felder?
I was going to invite Ms. Stowe to speak to.
No, I'd love to hear.
The translations of surveys and information to parents.
Right, so we worked diligently with partners regarding the survey you just referenced, Ms. Doyle. And with regards to the email address, so here, just an example, if I change my phone number and I don't tell someone I've changed my phone number, then I will not receive messages. And so what's happened is that we do have families who have an email address that they no longer use, or they have not updated us with a current one. We have, I hope you're aware, but we did approve, or you approved TTCs a number of months ago, that we combed through all of our email addresses. But it is imperative that families, if you've heard a family member or any family say, and this is a PSA, public service announcement, if you do not receive emails, then you need to let your child's teacher or your school or your principal or me, anybody, know what that email address is, because we do send communications out on a regular basis. Our school principals send out communications every weekend. And so if a family is not receiving anything, then we need to make sure we have that up to date.
Okay, so, all right.
And let me also add, there are families and there are citizens who've requested information from us, and they don't use email.
Well, that's the point.
I mean, but that is their choice to not use email. So they have to notify us and their school and teacher of how they would like to receive those notifications. And we do accommodate for that.
Yes.
Phone, text, as you're aware, we use text.
Website.
Yes, and a number of different social media apps. And I do want to give credit to our principals, because they are also very creative at the school level in knowing the different avenues that their families prefer, and knowing the families that don't get or won't receive the email, and ensuring that they're using a proper, it's a whole plethora of different avenues to get the information out. It's not just a click, we sent the email, I hope you got it. And I think that'd be a conversation that could be had at a later date with principals, just at the number of things they're doing to reach families.
So let's see, other board members with comments?
Please.
Sarah?
This is a longer term suggestion for this policy, but I think it could be helpful at the beginning to have like a few sentences about why the school district administers surveys to students in the first place. What are some of the reasons we do that? And maybe have a definition of what a survey is, because I thought Bonnie's point about isn't Panorama sort of an assessment I think that there's like an argument for that for sure. I will say that I am fully in support of this change, because I think it is imperative that we maximize like that youth behavior risk survey, which we know is tied to funding and all of these other things, not necessarily for us, I don't think, but it's imperative that we maximize the share of students that we hear from, so we have an accurate picture of understanding. And I think this needing to return the permission form in advance is a massive barrier to that. I think some of the other things in here around parental notification, so the system notifying parents about upcoming surveys and that parents have the right to review any surveys in advance and things like that, to me, addresses concerns about sort of parents being left in the dark or whatever. I just think overcoming the low response rates on surveys that the district has decided are really important matters a lot.
Well,
So again, I do have concerns with the wording of this protected information, and the opt-out is not defined. So we do know families don't have smartphones. We know families don't have internet. We know, how is this going to get distributed? Are we going to say we're going to distribute it by paper copy to every family and the student should bring it home to their family? My concern is not defining how the opt-out procedure is going to happen. And there are so many barriers for our families around this. And I think we owe it to our parents to define that and allow them the opportunity to opt out, especially when collecting information that parents are very sensitive about.
Hillary?
They do have the option to opt out, and so do all of the students. So like they're still being informed. Lots of communication is being sent out. They can opt out. Students can opt out. So it's, I feel like what you're saying is an option.
I'm just asking, define how the opt-out occurs. That's all I'm asking for. Is it going to be by email? Is it going to be by email, phone, paper? If we define that, I'm okay with it. I just think we owe it to say how we're going to do it and then execute to it. And that way families know they have that option. I just don't like opt-out and somebody say, oh, it was in the principal's call this week. You didn't hear that?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
So that's my concern.
So I have a question around taking this to first read to second read and wondering about things like protocols, Eva, and how, because we don't normally put protocols in the policies, but could we? Or what would that look like to have more information on
I'll
protocols?
say a couple of things. First of all, this policy governs more than the YRBS. So, a survey about what new name do you think you should give to our new robotics team may allow an opt-out, but you're not going to have as robust a communication, so it is going to vary depending on what the survey is about. So the second question was whether that's appropriate to put in policy. And I think you can put some level of, as long as you keep in mind that a policy is about more than one survey. And that's probably something that staff would want to give some input on, because I don't know how they use opt-out for a variety of things, but it varies. So I don't know exactly what they would think would be the best way. I will note that since we're talking about the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, I do want it to be clear on the record that that is anonymous. Students are instructed not to write their name on it. So it is not something where their information is being gathered about that student, just a note. But sure, between first and second reading, certainly something can be added, yes.
And I was curious if, when it comes back, if we could have information on what the participation has been in our prior surveys, because I believe we're going to find a bias, a race and a income bias in our participation. And then the other thing is, I was wondering if we could reach out to our Family Success Alliance and maybe our principals and some of the others and just see how they feel about it. I would just like them to say, yeah, that's fine with us, we're good, or not.
Okay, Dr. Felder, do those requests about what opt-out protocols would look like and some input from principals, would that be reasonable to have some of that information gathered between now and when this comes back?
That's something we can do.
Okay. Great. So again, these were first reads for both of these policies, so they will come back before the board for a second read. It seems like people didn't really have any concerns about the first policy, well, except for the changes that were requested to bring it back to the level that it had been previously. So is anyone comfortable making a motion on approving the first read of these policies?
Motion to approve the policies on first read with the discussed changes.
Second.
Okay, a motion from Ms. Smiley, a second from Vice Chair Stevens. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you, everybody. And thank you for your help, Eva.
Thank you.
And Dr. Felder for help with staff before we come further.
And can I say, Madam Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
With the policies, it is quite helpful, especially if we have concerns and questions, if we would simply attend the policy meetings and we could, put all our thoughts on the table at that point and kind of hammer it out.
Yeah, that's
a little more. We did talk about it a lot then, but we could just bear that in mind for our next meeting.
I'll take a motion. It's 9:29. Yeah, go ahead, Will. Oh, are we on something? Oh,
Joint meeting?
oh, right. We're going to discuss the, go ahead, Will. What, you brought this up. What would you like to?
So, the question I had is, I know you've said multiple times, this is not a budget discussion, but based on our budget timeline that we went through the budget committee, this meeting is the only meeting that we get the opportunity to tell the county commissioners what we are wanting and why. And I noticed that we are doing that in the closing remarks in the last 10 minutes. Is that enough time to share that? Or I just wanted to get more thoughts around the meeting and the small amount of time on the budget part of it, which seems like there's not enough time for them to ask us questions. Have they accepted they're just going to listen and then we're going to leave? I'm just trying to understand. So I wasn't at the meeting or the joint collaboration discussion, so.
So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Doyle, is that what we would typically bring at the meeting this week will be done at the Board of County Commissioners work session on May 12th.
So typically, May 12th, and I'm looking at the county's meeting calendar, it shows that meeting is not a joint meeting, but a work session for them.
Right.
So y'all meaning staff could speak, but the board will not get an opportunity to speak at that meeting.
My understanding is that where both school districts will bring their recommended budget for next year.
That is very different than anything that's ever been done. So I'm glad we are discussing this because I just want to make sure we get the opportunity to speak about it. And that's why I asked, because when I saw this, I was like, oh geez, we only have 10 minutes. So, okay, that makes contextual sense to me, and I appreciate the opportunity for us to talk. Does anybody else have questions?
Well, just looking at the meeting, when we're talking about teacher retention and recruitment, is our opportunity to say our budget is designed. We're not going to be asking for money for the mental health, even though we need it. But teacher retention and recruitment doesn't happen if we can't get the ask for these supplements. Yeah. Right. And we could add the point about the allotment, because we haven't asked for an increase in the supplement. All we've asked for is a fix for the supplement, and there's some indication that our supplement is low. But I think we do have to make that case compelling.
Other board members with comments about it? Okay. Great. Dr. Felder, any points you want to make about it?
Not on this topic.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, without any further discussion, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
Great. Motion from Vice Chair Stevens, a second from Ms. Hauser. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. I hope everyone has a safe drive home tonight. Thank you.